All right, cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining. This kind of just started off me just uh, thinking things through. This kind of just started off me just thinking things through. Sorry, good feedback. This kind of just so yeah, this started off just me thinking. I've recently applied for a job. I've also recently started getting or hiring people for jobs. Recently, obviously, as a part of that process, going through some CVs. So it got me thinking, like, hey, especially given the current circumstance where people are unfortunately losing jobs, graduates are just graduating from university, just share some of the experiences that I've had along the way, some of the things that I've learned along the way, as well as the likes of Mark. Mark is also primarily in the position of a hiring person, as well as dealing with interns and being in the industry for a while. And then Angus is someone who's actually, well, he's a recruiter. In fact, why am I introducing you guys? Mark, why did you go? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm Mike. I think most people in the room probably know who I am. I'm a senior person in InfoSec at an ISP. And as Sean mentioned there a minute or two back, I do get involved in recruitment. I do get involved in the acquisition of interns and people like that into various roles. But also, I actually came into InfoSec from a kind of a bit of a weird source. You know, my journey's kind of a little bit varied and interesting, hopefully. So, full disclosure though, I've not applied for a job in any real seriousness for nearly 9 years. So I'm not here to tell you how to apply for a job, but I am here to perhaps provide a little bit of insight into how you can identify opportunities and how you can then go for those opportunities. And that's really where I am and the contribution I'm hoping to make this evening. So I'll hand over to Angus. I'm a senior person.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I'm Angus Reid. IRL, I am Charles Heinroth, and not to be confused with my father of the same name on LinkedIn. I've been a technical security recruiter and a chief operating officer of a small boutique recruiting agency, predominantly working the United States security market. A company called Red Blue Security, originated from the UK, and I do technically advanced security recruiting, predominantly for companies in Silicon Valley. You know, everything from fintech to driverless technology. We also have a lot of clients in the consulting space that do pen testing, red teaming, DFIR, and sort of anything analyst orientated. And then we also have quite a few clients in the defense sector that we do various bits with. And yeah, we purely and solely focus on security hiring. So that's given me an it's introduced me to an industry I didn't know really existed, and I've been sort of infatuated with it since I got involved. But yeah, before that, I served 6 years in the British military, and then after that, I did, because I hadn't known about this industry, I did 6 years in high risk security consulting, physical security consulting, predominantly in East and West Africa, and also some time in the Middle East. And then recently, I've been getting involved with a lot of conferences. I've been taking advantage of the whole pandemic and the opportunity that's brought. So I've been volunteering at a few conferences. Spoke at Isolation Con with TMHC and also did some bits there. And then I also volunteered with GrimCon, DerpCon, for doing like resume reviews and career advice. I only did like 8 resumes, and just this weekend I did resume reviews for Circle City Con, which was a fantastic con. And I think that's pretty much it. I am also at the moment sort of learning about tech and about doing some of the stuff that I judge people on. Using Kali and doing forensics and crypto and that sort of thing. Always keep my hand in recruiting. I think that's my introduction as far as I understand.
Cool. Thanks. Sorry for the background noise. Got a wild kid
No,
in at the moment. And Sorry, one more person, James. So James Reynolds, he's a similar lines along Angus, but more internal recruiter. James, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Let me just turn my video on as well. I was middle eating dinner when this started. So hello. So I'm James. From the logo you might see Sean's wearing the same. I am the recruiter at Immersive Labs, which is a cybersecurity kind of gamified learning platform that's been built over the last kind of 3 years. So I'm based in kind of Bristol in the UK. I've been here since about September last year. And we've grown. I was like employee 80 or something. We're now up to like 120, 125, and growing pretty quickly. So I recruit for pretty much everything across the business. So that includes kind of cyber people for our kind of content team. Sean via Mike actually for kind of AppSec and kind of new product that we're doing on secure coding. And then all of our engineers, and we've also got kind of an office in Boston where we're hiring lots of salespeople. So I do all of that recruitment as well. So I'm probably more of like a, I guess, generalist or technical generalist recruiter. So used to seeing lots and lots of different CVs, do a bit of exec search as well. But yeah, that's pretty much me, I think.
Quite interesting, that, isn't it? The circle is now complete, to use a Darth Vader term. So
yeah.
Sean and I are very close friends, and you know, the Bear Farmers thing and all that kind of stuff. And you were becoming a bit restless, Sean. I think it's fair to say, that your previous employer, and the power of social media. I dropped a tweet out as James alluded to there, and James replied and hooked up with Sean. And under these difficult circumstances, and I guess we'll touch on that perhaps in a little while, Sean managed to find a brand new role, and that's happened during a particularly difficult time for everybody in the room. And it proves that actually, where there's the will and the motivation, then you can actually make a change. So, but I think we'll cover that in a bit more detail as the evening progresses. Sean.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for the introductions. So one of the things I want to just reiterate and kind of make clear, like, this is intended to be a interactive session. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to unmute yourself. I think you should be able to chime in. If you do not want to speak publicly, that's totally fine. Just pop a IM. You can just do it to everyone, or just to either Mark, myself, or Angus, or James. For those on Twitch, we'll try to follow the Twitch chat stream, just to make sure if there are any questions there, we'll try to answer them as well. So before I begin, does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask in the meantime before we really kick things off? Okay, no? So yeah, as I said, if you've got any, please chime in. So I think one of the things that I've seen come up often around jobs and that, and certainly when I was coming out of university, is you get very worried about do I meet the spec? So you get a job spec, there's all these requirements, and then you start going through them, and you go, yep, nope, yep, nope, and then you go, okay, well, I don't meet everything, so therefore I'm not going to apply. So I'm just going to start off first and say, like, my opinion is, if you meet a lot of the requirements, so obviously if you don't meet any of the requirements, then don't apply. But if you find yourself meeting most of the requirements, apply. Don't treat it just simply because you see a job spec and you don't meet every requirement on there means you shouldn't apply. You should definitely apply. I've applied for jobs where I've not met like maybe even 20-30% of the job spec, and I still managed to get the job. Sometimes those doing the job spec might just try to throw a broader net, because at times they might not even be 100% sure what they are looking for. They have a good idea what they're looking for, but it's often very difficult to try and narrow it down to a specific, like, these are the requirements that we have to get for this job spec. it's often difficult to get that exact list. What's everyone else's thoughts? Mark, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that.
So-
I think, sorry, Angus, I'll come to you in a sec. Or James, sorry. I think I completely agree with the idea that companies recruiting for people do find it quite difficult to recruit because they're not recruiters. Yep, they're after often a role, and they're after a unicorn a lot of the time. Some of the job descriptions I see via LinkedIn, for example, are 5 roles rolled into one role. So you're talking they're after a security analyst, an architect, a compliance person, an engineer, etc., etc. So companies, in my experience, and I guess Angus sees this a lot, are notoriously bad at actually creating job descriptions in the first place. So they'll come up with a core set of requirements, and then they'll kind of go, oh well, we'll bolt in this and we'll bolt in that because we could do these extra disciplines and these extra responsibilities. And at the end of it, you see a thing that's impossible to be 100% compatible with. So again, going back to your point, Sean, it's if you meet a reasonable proportion of the criteria that's set out in the job description, then I completely agree. Definitely apply for it.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Angus, you had something? Or you want to go? What, add? Or are you frozen?
I think Angus crashed.
All right. While we're waiting for Angus, James, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. So it was on requirements, wasn't it? Yeah, there definitely is a lot of like overlisting requirements on kind of job specs, where you get that kind of mash up of 2 roles together, particularly at smaller companies, where you might have to do like way more than kind of a niche role. Something that is happening now a lot more in kind of, I guess, recruitment is thinking about kind of inclusion and diversity. And we found, like, there's research into this that's found that if you have less kind of requirements in the job description, you generally get like a broader, diverse set of candidates. So I don't know if any of the I guess women on the call can testify to this, but the research typically suggests that if you have like lots of requirements, men will apply for like all the jobs. Whereas if kind of women are applying for jobs, they need to meet like all of the requirements. So there is kind of a bit of a change going on based upon kind of this research that was done around kind of requirements. But yeah, I guess kind of reiterating what Sean and Mike said, that if you match like the top 3 and you can evidence that on your application, then, and it's a job that you're interested in, like, don't just apply for everything. I think, like, go for things that you're actually interested in, that you want to do at companies that you want to work at, and then tailor your application to those jobs. So if it's asking for like, I don't know, experience with a certain tool, like, make sure that's on your CV, because that's like a specific requirement that's on the job. If you don't have it, explain like maybe where you might get that experience from as well. But that's kind of why requirements do exist on the job ads.
From my side, so it's important to understand like what is a job description, like who builds it and where does it come from. So as a lot of you said, a lot of job descriptions will amalgamate multiple positions or nuances of a certain position into one job description, right? So and we as an agency do that as well, especially for sort of evergreen type positions. Like, we always have clients looking for pen testers or threat analysts, so we'll always have sort of a position open. We will shut those down, however, when there is no PID for it or no position for it, because we're not about harvesting resumes. But it's important to remember where it comes from. So who writes job descriptions? It might be someone like James that is, technically savvy with what is the requirement, and speaking with hiring managers and team members of the team that someone might join to understand the requirements. So job descriptions might be written from the top of the food chain, especially in a startup that's got like less than sort of 40-50 people. You'll find that the senior people in that company will add a lot of weight behind the job description. It might be written by a supervisor. It might have additions from the team members. And sometimes with companies I deal with in the fintech space, I actually had a client once that had a technical writer on the books that purely just wrote job descriptions. Now, they were extremely good job descriptions and they were extremely in depth. But to go to your point about having a simplified job description, it does help. I always try dumb it down. We find that if we get a 2-page job description, I'm like, all right, then as an agency, you do a thing called a qualifying call. So you call the client and say, hey, you needed help with this, and they say yes, and they say, okay, tell me about the role, tell me who they're working for, who they're answering to, team size, culture, all that stuff. And then I always ask, like, what is crucial on this job description? And I ask them to not open the job description, to just tell me what they feel is crucial. Then I might get 5 or 10 lines, or I get the bigger picture behind what they're looking for, right? When you start then hunting as an agency recruiter and you start sending them candidates, you quickly realize you can take that 2-page job description that became 10 to 15 lines now suddenly becomes 5 or 6 lines. You know exactly what the client is looking for and what they're not looking for. So you'll get such a wide variation and variety of job descriptions, and you'll also get a lot of companies that will have job descriptions for contract proposals. Like in physical security, I experienced that time and time again, where I get a call by a recruiter saying, hey, there's this company, they're looking for a senior security supervisor, or they're looking for a superintendent. And then I realize after a while, you have to ask the question, like, does this contract exist, or is this for a proposal? Because then they'll take a wad of resumes. I guess in these days they'll do it digitally, but they will take a wad of resumes for a big proposal on a contract and say, these are the people we're going to have. This is one of these 3 people are going to be leading it. These are our 4 supervisors, and these are our analysts, and these are our engineers, to add weight behind a proposal. So it's important to remember, like, there's such a wide disparity in this. And to go back to the point on when do you apply for a job, I read research, and obviously don't quote me on this, that they analyzed men versus women, and when the different people apply for jobs. Men would tend to apply for a job if they meet almost a minute amount of the needs on the job description. Like, we're talking like 20%, 30%, whereas women, because for whatever reason, would only apply for a job if they met like 60 to 80% of the requirements. My thought process and the rule of thumb is, if you match 50% of that job description, you truly do match it. Not, hey, I could learn this or I could learn that. If you know in your heart of hearts you can manage 50% of the job description, like, it's worth applying. If you can hit some of the bonus points, you're even more likely. So what's not going to work, and I never want to dispel people's opportunities. I've been called the destroyer of dreams on TMHC, but that's besides the point. Is that if you literally do not meet a requirement by any means necessary, like, it is literally not worth applying. What you might want to do, if you're interested and excited about a certain company, right? Like, we'll use Immersive Labs for example. It's a fantastic company. I've got a subscription there because I was in the British military, which is, by the way, a really cool idea that Immersive Labs had. But if you're interested in joining a company but they don't have a position open for you, there's nothing stopping you either contacting a recruiter such as myself and saying, hey, I am interested in this company. I want to do what it takes to get in with this company. Because what we do then as agencies, we do a thing called we call it a spec in. So we specify you into a company. We say, hey, we've got this person. We do like a generalized proposal, like, this is what this person can bring to the table. Do you think there is a need for this person? And the company might say no, or they might say yes, but not right now, or they'll say, yeah, let's talk to them. I try to build trust with my clients in that I asked them, I was like, do you want me to send you some randoms that I find, some gems that I find? And a lot of times they go, yeah. It doesn't always work out, but if you want to join a company, you don't really care what you're going to do there. If you want to join a company, it doesn't stop you reaching out to a recruiter such as myself that works for that company, that works for that company, or you reach out to someone in that company and say, hey, I like what you people are doing. I've heard some good things. Like, is there any viable opportunity there? And pitch yourself well with that. You'd be surprised how far that can go, and how a company will open up a slot something that they've thought about, just not planned for someone unique and special. Rambled a bit there.
Oh, thank you. Really, really good points. And yeah, just to re-emphasize Angus's point, like oftentimes those might apply and not get the position for whatever reason. They get often put on like a list. It sounds bad. It's a good list.
No, it's true.
And there might be a new position or a new role open up, and companies will go through that list and go, hey, what about this person? They were really great in an interview, just their skills didn't align with what we were needing, but their skills suddenly align with exactly what we need now. Let's get them in for another interview. And that's the way that some people can proceed forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Like on the if I may say, like on the agency side, so I tend to deal with higher end type candidates. I do have, more base level type positions, but a lot of my stuff is high end, real unfindable stuff, right? But like recently I came across someone, right? It was a young guy. I think he had finished a degree, a master's that year, and he'd be working in the field for about a year, right? Young kid, but super enthusiastic. And I was like, you know what, this guy doesn't meet my requirements for the position that I was recruiting for. I was recruiting for like a mid-level senior position, right? And his communication was decent. It was respectful. It showed enthusiasm. I thought, you know what, this guy's good. Like, let's give him a call. And I had to call him, and I ended up spending 2.5 hours on the call with him. And right after that call, I took that guy's CV and I sent it to as many of my clients that I could send it to that would have sort of airtime with to look at this. And I said, hey, this guy's young. He's got a good education. He is super eager. He wants to be a pen tester, but I think he could sell your product and you could sell your company so well. I even pitched him to clients I don't recruit for. I wouldn't get paid for that, but it's not, for me, it's not always about making money. It's about bringing unique opportunities to the right people. So being respectful and enthusiastic is a massive thing. I know when I do a call with someone and they literally do not care about the opportunity coming to them, no matter how much money is on the table, how much prestige is like the position could bring. Some people are just really dry about it, and that always concerns me. And that is, however, separate from people that are, I think the term is neurodiverse, like people that are on the spectrum, or that like I've developed an ability to sort of pick that up, or sometimes I might ask about it, or build some trust with the person before we just like, yeah, you're good, let's send you over. Like, we'll build a bit of trust so I can have that discussion. But if you're just going to be difficult about things and not sound enthusiastic, then there's no point in me helping represent you. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is always try to be positive, and you'd be surprised when you approach your job seeking in a different way, in a more personalized way, with a bit more enthusiasm and panache, that the opportunity that you might be looking for might actually become multiple opportunities with various companies. So always, like, a lot of people get that wrong. They just don't. No one likes looking for a job. It's probably one of the most stressful things you can do, especially if you're out of a job. And some people forget, like, the opportunity that is right at their doorstep. Like, I'm coming to your LinkedIn and I'm knocking on that door saying, hey, I've got something cool and interesting and exciting for you here. And then people go, okay, well, yeah, sure. Like, enthusiasm does help.
What about the idea of building a public profile? So by that, I'm talking about being busy on GitHub, being busy on blogging, being busy on Twitter, getting some, putting in some CFPs in rookie tracks.
So, sorry, Mark, I just want to, 1 sec, we'll definitely come back to the question. There are 2 questions in the Zoom chat that I don't want to lose. Mark, do you mind if we just come back to that question?
Of course, yep, absolutely.
All right, so one quick mention from Christo. He's found that HR screens CVs. Certainly, there is often a higher kind of level that screens things. So we'll come back to that in terms of tips for writing CVs.
Yes.
Question
I mean, I can answer that if you want.
Let's come back to that.
Okay.
They'll fit in with the CV section. I just
Okay.
stay in these so we don't forget about them or they get lost in text.
Okay.
The first question is from Dan. What about if skills and experience they're asking for is a bit flimsy? I'm not speaking like they need a CISSP. It just seems like to be understand X, Y, and Z, you need to be able to communicate Z.
I mean, unless you understand the question differently, I think what they're talking about is when a company's job description, like if you look at it, it doesn't sound right. Like the requirements they're looking for doesn't match the title or the company's core business. Is that the way you see it, Sean, or do you understand it differently?
I think I can understand where Dan's come from. I see it slightly different. It's like it's not very clear what they're looking for. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, must have a strong security knowledge in order to improve our security. So as a security professional, you're like, well, what does that mean? What kind of security? What sort of things are you looking for? And Dan, if we're wrong, please correct us.
That goes back to, once again, who's written the job description. If it was someone if someone in HR that wrote it, chances are, and that'll tie in a little bit what Krista said, like chances are there's going to be a lot of, here we go. Now I'll give you an example. A sound understanding of system architecture, able to understand the risk impact of vulnerabilities on existing designs and system, and identify how easy or difficult it will be to yeah, no, that's not that cool. You got to remember, in a job description, there's going to be some technical bits, there's going to be some stuff on education, certification, and there is going to be some soft skill stuff. So yes, it is extremely broad, and the ideal would be that a company could say, this is our stack, this is who we use for cloud, this is what we use as microservices, we use think as canaries, we use this, that, and the other. But the problem is that creates an innate risk to that company. So you kind of, I hate it, but you kind of have to suck it up and just say, like, okay, this sentence here makes no sense to me. That doesn't, however, stop you, if you do get an interview with that company, to say, like, hey, this is on a job description. What does that actually mean? Most likely with a job description like what Dan's posted, it's been a collaborative piece of work that people have added to job descriptions. And a lot of times sometimes people add fluff, like, that old saying, like, this meeting could have been an email. A lot of the times, a lot of the stuff in a job description is completely irrelevant. Recently, I posted a job. I had a client looking for a old school senior Linux system administrator, right? The job description I think I posted was about 3 lines, right? Because I could have blown this massively out of proportion and listed, like, what specific Linux distributions they've used, or what tools they've used. But the fact is, it's one of those positions that you either fit it or you don't. So yeah, Dan, I hope that answers your question. I mean, Mike, Sean, feel free to chime in.
I think it goes back to the original point we made at the beginning around how poorly recruiting companies are at writing out their requirements. So there is a case perhaps to get an analyst, and that could be a business analyst actually in the organization, to sit down with the hiring manager and flesh out the requirements in maybe a Moscow style prioritization model, and look at the things that are really important, and then understand how to write sentences in a better way than the examples that Dan shared here, because they're terrible. The statements there are really, they're just bullshit, quite frankly. Okay. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the hiring manager sat at home bashing out a job description. It can be a collaboration between the hiring manager, the HR and recruitment people within the organization, and somebody that's got better skills at capturing requirements. And often they are analysts within the organization. So that's my take on it. Sean, James, about you?
Yeah, I think like capturing, there's definitely like a disconnect in recruitment between like it's such a weird role that we actually do in recruitment. Like you've got this business analyst hat on, trying to understand exactly what the business needs and kind of where the role is going to sit, what they're actually going to be doing. And then we have to go and like find people. So we essentially like Google lots, explore the internet, trying to find everyone. And then we've got to like sell to them as well. So it's this weird mix of skills to actually be good at recruitment. And then you've got like the copywriting of an advert and kind of all the written communication you have to do to kind of manage a process. So no recruiter is going to be good at all of that. No, I'm definitely not. I can tell you that. So like, it is really annoying that like their bad adverts exist and like you speak to recruiters and they know nothing about what you actually do sometimes. Yeah. But it's just like, it's a weird job, and just generally no one's going to know like everything about it. So I've definitely written some adverts like this in my time when I was kind of early on in my career. And I think it's people trying to like oversell a bit rather than be like specific about what you actually want. Because that's not really going to attract anyone.
That kind of
thing. Yeah, it's like, oh, I've got 2,000 word count. Let's use like all of it.
Yeah. The thing is that sometimes companies do that to have high rankings, SEO rankings, so that they, you go on Indeed, there's tens of thousands of jobs there. So you might find a lot of times that they'll add keywords to get more applications for that job. But like something I'll admit in public is, say a client says, hey, we have this new position. We're looking for an infrastructure security engineer. Okay, cool. Like, do you have a job description? And sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. I will quickly run through the job description, but on that first call I do with them about that job, like I said earlier, I'll ask them like, what is critical? Give me 5 critical points. Like if you had to put this job description in a tweet, what is it going to look like? And then they're like, oh, like this, and this. I'm like, you want them to have experience with this. They're going to be doing this, and this will be the responsibilities. And they go, yeah. Very, very seldomly will I actually go back to the job description, because I over time I've built an innate understanding of the sort of symbiosis and technology of the different tools and systems and operating systems and how the different people in an organization fit together. And that allows me to not say like, okay, here's a job description, okay, and I'm going through profiles, I'm like, match, no, not a match, matches perfectly. There's always going to be variations to it. The client might say they're looking for a super senior engineer, and then maybe I find 2 junior engineers that have massive potential. I'm saying, look, this might cost you a bit more, but in the long term, you're gonna have more headcount, which is gonna achieve different things. This person is really strong at this and weak at this, and this person is strong at what that person's weak and weak at that what that person's strong. So it all sort of gels together. So a job description is merely, in my mind, is like a best possible outcome. And I've seen some crazy fandango job descriptions, and then I sometimes advise a client and say, look, we need to overhaul this job description, because you've got engineering in here, you've got architecture. They need to be doing infrastructure engineering, and have experience with AWS, Azure, and GCP. And then they're also doing help desk tickets. And like, if it's a 5 head company, like, sure, like you're gonna wear many hats. But if you're a company that's got 1,000 people, like when they start piling, and sometimes I just tell a client, I say, look, this is what you're looking for. Like, it doesn't exist. I haven't seen it yet. So it might take me 3 months to find you 5 sort of decent people. So take a job description for what it is. It's a concept of the job and a concept of the person, but it's not necessarily going to equate to what you'll actually be doing and what the job actually will evolve into.
The other thing I want to add is like those job descriptions with 20 years AWS experience.
Yeah.
but that aside, I think one thing also to bear in mind is like, much like how you as an applicant has experience, much like some of the recruiters have experience, those writing the job descriptions, those trying to hire people, also have experience in terms of writing job applications, hiring people, they have an idea how they or what they're looking for, but it may not always come across as how they want or what they're looking for. So sometimes it might be worth cutting them a bit of slack in some sense, because they also still got to learn how to write things that make maybe a bit more sense for the job market or something like that. They they're not recruiters. They're not people who go out, and that's where it obviously helps if you have recruitment teams or recruitment agencies that can help with that. But I feel sometimes that maybe some recruitment agencies might not help with that. So it's worth bearing that in mind. All right, so got a question from MJ Mull. MJ Yule. I don't think it's a weird question. So what they're asking is, when should they mention things such as mental health issues? Should they mention it on a CV or interview step? Who wants to take a stab at this first?
Yeah, I'm happy to do this. So you shouldn't mention it on a CV is the first thing. And that's the reason I say that is it's not something that you need to disclose to anyone. And it is something that if like a hiring manager sees your CV and they haven't experienced like mental health issues before, they're not kind of familiar with it, there's kind of biases that come in to play, whether they're conscious or unconscious. So yeah, that's one of the reasons. The main thing is like you just don't need to disclose it, particularly not in writing, to anyone who you don't know. Like you don't know who's going to be reading your CV when you apply. You've no idea who else. Like if you apply to an organization, that might get sent to quite a few other people in that organization who are decision makers as well. And you have no idea who they are. They might know you, and you might not want to disclose that kind of thing to them. So yeah, definitely don't include that on your CV. I would say, I'm doing a lot of recruitment in the UK, and in the UK you have to accommodate reasonable adjustments at interview. So it's that point that you would, if like you require anything that needs changing for an interview. So as an example, I've had interviews when I used to do recruitment for Parliament, and we used to get all these sort of things where there was a guy who had epileptic fits. So he gave us that kind of information when we arranged his interview. And so we couldn't sit him in a room with fluorescent lights. So instead we found a room without fluorescent lights. And the interview went fine. There was one guy who couldn't walk up the stairs, and there were stairs to the interview. So we found a different room. So you get things like that. So it's generally at point before you attend the interview. If it's going to affect your ability to perform during said interview, that you should disclose it. If it's and for mental health, this could be around like anxiety. If there's a presentation, it could be kind of, you might have anxiety around public speaking, or kind of being in front of lots of people. Like if they don't, sometimes on interview confirmations, they might not tell you exactly how many people you're going to be presenting to, and that can definitely kind of trigger anxiety, or if it's a panel. So I would suggest tell your kind of recruiter or your HR person at that point that you're in contact with, that like this might happen, or you might need like a bit longer for something. And also ask them lots of questions so that you then feel prepared to handle that sort of thing. Because even if it's not disclosed on like an email to you or email confirmation, or however you get that kind of interview confirmation, don't be afraid to just ask like lots more information. One, it shows you're really interested, but two, it will kind of help you feel more at ease in that interview situation. Something we started doing recently, so I do a lot of work around kind of neurodiverse hiring as well, to try and create more diverse teams. And we started to do kind of walkarounds before interviews, so that candidates can come to the building and then see the environment they're actually going to be interviewed in, so that they can get comfortable with it. And don't be afraid to ask for stuff like that as well, if you feel like that's something that you need. Most businesses will be quite happy to accommodate things like that. And then I guess during the interview itself, again, you're interviewing probably with someone who on the other side of the table who you've never met, or on the other side of the screen nowadays. So only kind of disclose stuff that you feel comfortable disclosing to someone. Again, it kind of goes back to the CV bit as to why you don't include mental health issues or any kind of medical issues on a CV, is that you don't need to disclose that information. You can't, there's a legal requirement that you can't be judged on kind of health or mental health issues unless it affects your ability like to specifically do the job. So as an example, if you have to like move heavy boxes and you have like a bad back and you can't lift stuff, that's a reason for not to be hired. But general mental health stuff, like you can't be prejudiced against for that. Like there's actually legal protection in place for that in most countries. I wouldn't say all, but most. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, James. Sorry, one thing I completely forgot about. So I am sharing and streaming the Zoom channel. So if you private message me, and apologies to those who might have already done so, I totally forgot about this. If you private message me, it's going to show up in there. So please do it on like Twitter or something like that. Sorry, completely, and that's my fault. I apologize. These things when you streaming.
Spam him now. Spam him now.
Forget these things. All right. So Mark, you had a question before these other questions popped up.
I did. More a combination of an observation and a question. I'm going to drop a link into the chat here. I'll drop it into the chat on Twitch too, just so people can harvest the URL. So I've been in InfoSec for quite a lot of years, and in technology for over 30 years. And the thing that kind of helped me become a little bit more active, and certainly in the community, was I stumbled across a video by Troy Hunt, which is called Hack Your Career. And it's a talk he gave at NDC Oslo in 2017. It's an hour, a really valuable hour, I think, of anyone's time. But what he talks about is how you're in a bad place in your career or you're dissatisfied with your job or life in general, and what you can do about it, and some tips and tricks and methods and techniques to get yourself out of the position you're in and into something that's more fulfilling and something that you enjoy. And a very significant part of that talk, and something that I learned a lot from and then went away and did, was around creating a profile of yourself. And it can be a number of things. In my case, I started blogging and going to security conferences. That's what I did. And that led on to new stuff, like speaking at security conferences. It even led to the creation of the Beer Farmers, quite frankly. But what Troy talks about is things like, you don't have to go off and be a speaker. That's not everybody's thing. Yeah. And there is no compulsion on anybody to go out and become a public speaker in InfoSec or any kind of thing like that. But there are certain little things that you can possibly start considering that might help complement your job application. And by that, I'm talking about things like, if you've done some cool research or you've created some good tooling, stick it on GitHub. Yeah, make it public to people, unless there's a reason why you don't want to make it public. But if you've created a little bit of something that does something that other people might benefit from, share it. Right, that's really cool, because what you're then beginning to do is build a body of evidence around your work, because CVs are just words on a page. Okay, at the end of the day, CVs are you going, I'm the big I am, this is me, and I'm super cool, and you must hire me. Well, actually, you need things to corroborate that, and an interview helps, because the prospective employer will question you and challenge you around some of the things that you say on your CV. But how brilliant is it to be able to point them to something on the web that you've done that's real? Okay, so hey, I blog about my experiences, and there you go, it's on there. Go find my website, and you can read the stories and the experiences that I've done and had. Go and visit my Git repo. Go and look me out on Twitter. Don't look me out on Twitter, because I just shit post. But things like that are all real, tangible things that a prospective employer can look for and find, and see actual proof that you are who you say you are and your credentials are real. I hate the place, but LinkedIn is really important as well. Okay, I don't spend a lot of time on there, but it's important, and you need to get your profile in LinkedIn in order. Okay, with your career history, because again, it can reflect your CV. It can be a mini intro into what your CV is going to look like. And then I guess the final point before I go to the other guys is, if you've got profiles online, under the COVID lockdown, I've kind of broke my own role here, but generally speaking, if you've got a Twitter page and you've got a blog and you've got a GitHub repo and you've got a LinkedIn account and whatever else, make the profiles consistent because it's your brand. Okay. So use things like consistent profile images and backgrounds and methods and titles and all that kind of stuff, because wherever people look for you, they'll see a consistent version of Mike Thompson. Okay. So that's really all I want to say about it. If you're not doing any of those things, then do one thing. Just pick one of those things and go away and do them. So that's all I want to say.
One thing I just quickly, briefly want to add to that, Mike, on LinkedIn, a lot of people will say like, I don't want to be on LinkedIn, OPSEC, PERSEC, whatever. And I get that. I mean, LinkedIn is an extremely good resource, especially if you do like some Osen challenges and that. But when I receive an application and someone sends me their resume, I'll always ask them if they're on LinkedIn, especially if I find someone like on Discord that like wants information about a job I'm advertising. I'll always ask them for the LinkedIn. And the one key reason I always ask for that is some agencies, when it comes to resumes, will take your resume and then they'll pass it into a template that their company uses. Like some agencies have a template and that's what they stick with. I personally do not do that. I think a resume is a personal representation of your body of work or the words on the paper. But when it comes to LinkedIn, LinkedIn is it's like Facebook. It's got a structure. I know exactly where your profile picture is going to be. I know where your job title is going to be. I know there's going to be a summary. There's going to be your work experience. Then it's going to be your skills. Then it's a set format. So a lot of times for me, I've got your resume and I can sit and spend 20 minutes on your resume, but LinkedIn gives me a quick snapshot to see something, see you as a profile in a generic uniform format. Yes, you'll have different content. There'll be different companies listed and your summary might be different and your banner might be different. But that's one of the key things for me as a recruiter. Other than LinkedIn being one of the biggest resources I have, I use LinkedIn a lot of times just to see you as a profile in a generic format where everyone's looks roughly the same, just different content.
So are we allowed to speak? Mike?
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah. So I would like to comment on that because that's quite interesting insight actually. So that touches on our conversation, Mike, yesterday. So my LinkedIn profile doesn't have, apart from the recent certification that I did, has no mention about cybersecurity because it kind of reflects what I'm paid for. And I volunteer, or kind of, it's like unofficial secondment within my company. I do 2 days a week working within cybersecurity team, but that's nowhere near in my LinkedIn profile. And like next year, I probably will look for another job, and that knowing that people go and look at that, I would probably add additional detail. Because I have more on Twitter. If you look at my Twitter account, it's all about InfoSec. I don't have anything else on there. But LinkedIn is kind of, it reflects all about what I get paid for.
Okay.
So that's just a comment.
It's good. So look, you can put as much or as little in your LinkedIn as possible. The rule of thumb is the more you put in, the more attention you're probably going to get. Me as a recruiter, I get offered a CISO job probably every 2 to 3 weeks, and I sometimes I troll the recruiters to find out like where were they going with this, and then they suddenly actually look at my profile and they realize I'm a competitor to them, or I'm a recruiter. So you will get unwanted attention most likely with a LinkedIn, but the idea is just handle it. There's default response. As much as I hate them, the worst thing that people can respond to me on an email is a thumbs up. I just want to like yank my keyboard out and throw it through a window, but it's fine. You can send an automated response to an email just saying, hey, thanks very much, but not interested. Then it means I'll come back to you in the future. Maybe in the future you're looking for a job and you go, hey, remember you spoke to me about a job? And I'm going, well, it's not available anymore. Like, but hey, let's talk. Let's figure something out. Like, the more information you put on, the more attention you're going to get. But like, don't knock it until like, you might knock it until one day when you're like you know, you've been in your forever job and suddenly the company goes bust overnight, then suddenly you got to start like being a decent person on LinkedIn and being nice to recruiters. I'm not saying being nice to recruiters. Some recruiters are terrible. Like, that's why my job's so easy. But it's a very valid point to make.
I think so. And just to add to that as well, you know, GitHub and Twitter and blogging, they're not job sites. Yeah, they're just reflections of your work and the things that you've done. LinkedIn, like it or loathe it, LinkedIn is really a job site. That's practically its sole purpose in life. It's to connect people that want to work for another company, or to connect people that want to find people to work for another company. So I think it's important that wherever you put your information that's about your work, that somehow they all link to each other. Pardon the pun of linked, but I think so. Whatever you're doing on Twitter, then make it easily referenceable back to or from LinkedIn back to Twitter, so that when a recruiter's looking at your profile in the round, they can easily find that whole picture of you, Monica. So they're not having to ask you questions. So, you know, I've got links on my LinkedIn to my blog, and I mentioned the things that we do with the beer farmers and stuff. Just make it easy for somebody that's looking for somebody to find more information about you. I think that's the point. And I think that's a little bit more around what I was saying about making your profiles look a little bit, they don't have to be identical, but make them look similar enough to deliver a level of authenticity that it's you as well. I think that's really important, that the person that they're dealing with is the same person across different profiles on different social media.
Yeah. So just to add my input, because I've kind of come from it from an application point of view. So I certainly, to re-emphasize the whole thing around blog posts being public on Twitter and all of that, like I've seen the benefits of that firsthand. When I first started off my role in security, I just, passionate about security, and I wanted to learn more, try to learn where I could, but it was very much in my team, my echo chamber. I didn't go to cons, I didn't get involved in the community, and in a sense my career kind of stagnated. I was learning new things, but I wasn't learning much. I then decided in, I think it was in October 2017, that hey, I'm going to join Twitter, this great thing called Twitter. And hey, I'm going to start a blog and all of this. And I cannot, really, I cannot emphasize what a difference that's made. Not just from a knowledge point of view. You learn so much from that. It's just from a professional career progression point of view. I've kind of viewed my career up to that point like that, and then suddenly like that. It makes a huge difference. So if there's one piece of advice that I can give from a career point of view, get involved in the community. You don't, as Mark said, you don't have to go public speaking and that, but get involved in the community. You're going to help get your name out there. You're going to help gain information. You're going to help make contacts. And in a sense, making the networking is really important. I would not be working for Immersive Labs if I didn't know Mark. And Mark I wouldn't have got a job at Immersive Labs if Mark wasn't linked somehow on Twitter with James. So there's that network connectivity that makes a huge difference. And guess what? If I hadn't joined Twitter, I'd probably still be where I was, maybe unhappy, I don't know. But it's a really massive thing. And I'd like to say partly because I feel this had an impact on why I got the role where I am, is because of things like my blogging and all of that kind of stuff.
I agree with that. And I think I just want to pick up on a point you made about getting involved in the community. I think some people, and maybe a lot of people, don't know what actually that means. Go get involved in the community, do stuff in the community. Well, easier said than done when you don't know where to start. And there are places that you can start. And luckily, we have things like the B-Sides movement, which anybody that was on InfoSec Happy Hour, was it last Friday? We were joined by Jack Daniel, who was one of the co-founders of the B-Sides movement. And he took us through the history of it. That's not for tonight. But it's a generally free or very inexpensive community of conferences in the UK and worldwide, where you can turn up and meet people. that are actually either already experienced in the industry, new to the industry, not in the industry at all. And it's, you do find quite a lot of people turn up at these events that are looking to get into the industry, and they are more often than not people that are either coming out at the end of academic life, so they're in the final throes of their degrees, or they are in technical roles but not in security per se, and would like to make that move into security. That's what we mean by getting involved in the community. There are many meetups that aren't conferences in all the cities around the world. Some of them are technical, some of them are security, some of them are a bit of both. You can get along to those. They're often free. They're in pubs and bars and coffee shops and stuff like that. And you can go along, and they're very welcoming events, and they do not require that you are a security or necessarily a technical person to go along and attend. And they're places where you get opportunities to put your hand up and say, look, I don't know much about this stuff, but I'm really interested. And people will be sympathetic to that, and they will not patronize you, generally speaking, and they'll not condescend you, and they'll welcome you. And those are places where you can just go and learn new stuff a long time before you even consider getting involved at the pointier end of things like getting certificates. And I'm guessing we'll come on to certificates at some point as part of the evening. But again, the point being, there are loads of events that probably won't cost you any money, but maybe you travel and food and drink, perhaps. You can go to these things, and the place to find out about, you don't have to volunteer for these things, Manish, just to answer your question. They're regularly advertised on Twitter and Meetup and Eventbrite and places like that. They are, we have the DEF CON chapters in the UK, and they're places where, often it is security people that go to them, but anybody's welcome. You just turn up. It's like a pop-up event. They'll maybe get a couple of guest speakers on. It's all quite relaxed. People have a good time, and you learn stuff. And then to speak to Sean's final point, the networking aspect of it just starts to take care of itself. You start to build up people in your own network, and they can become your friends on Twitter, and you then start building relationships. Because at the end of the day, success is bred around how good a relationship works. And that's it, bottom line. And then, as Sean's demonstrated, opportunity can knock on the door, and we'll get on to how you get into a position at some point. But that's the whole point of being involved in the community, and it's very, very easy to do, and it's not as judgmental as you might think it is. But one word of caution, the community is very small. So the point there being is try and make more friends than you make enemies, because the more friends you have, the more likelihood you have of having a successful career. So I'm done for now.
True words. All right, so just trying to move things along. We're already an hour in. It's a fantastic conversation. So I think the next...
Sorry, Sean, before you carry on, sorry, mate, to interrupt you. Nikki's asked if she can have a couple of words. So,
oh, yeah.
Nikki.
Hey, guys. It was just off the back of what you've just been saying, Mike. I came into the industry completely my background's law. So I came in 3 years ago. And I said to Sean earlier, I wish I got to know people like you guys 3 years ago, because my journey would have been so much easier. However, a year ago, I was introduced to the Cyber Blogger Awards after InfoSec, and it was upstairs in a little pub in Olympia. We all know where I'm talking about. And I have never been in a room with so many talented people and felt so included. I'm not techie, so to speak. I'm sales, cybersecurity sales. This community, for anybody that is scared about entering B-sides or going to Blogger Awards or any of the networking, please don't hold back, because the last year has been a roller coaster and I've had the time of my life. And it is thanks to the likes of the Fat Hobbit, Sean, my beer farmers, all of it, Many Hats Club. It has been amazing, and I'm techie. So yeah, just get involved with it. It's not scary. It was scary that day, and I might have had to have a few stiff whiskies downstairs to go upstairs. It's the best thing that I ever did, and the networking side that you guys do is phenomenal for everybody. That was all.
Thank you very much.
Just don't go to the pub during summer. It gets so hot. Right. So yeah, thanks for those words, Nikki. That's really lovely to hear. So yeah, let's move on, because I'm just aware of time. So the next thing is CV. So from my point of view, one of the things I'm going to share is my very first experience. I looked at the job spec. I was like, yes, I match this. I pretty much match every requirement. I'm going to go off and I'm going to go apply, and crickets. Okay. Next job spec, great. I match it. I go off. I apply, crickets. And the same thing happened over and over and over and again. And it's like I just couldn't figure out why. And then my dad's friend took a look at my CV and actually explained to me what I was doing wrong. I was doing the shotgun approach, like listing every skill I knew, like every job I had, and go, there we go. And from that day, I learned that is the wrong way to do it. So
How many pages? How many pages?
it actually wasn't that long. I condensed it, but again, I just like, maybe it was tiny font as well. But yeah, I listed like too many things. And my point being is, when you're applying for a job, you also got to remember those reviewing the CV. Like a CV is just a foot in the door, in my opinion. It just gets you to that very first stage. And sometimes job applications, a recent one that I know of, had over 100 applications. So when you're trying to go through over 100 CVs, you don't want to like learn about the person's entire life history. That's where you kind of start getting to in terms of like interviews and that. You want to sift through. You want to find like, does this person match more or less what I'm looking for? Yes, great. Let's move them on. Or no, they probably don't match. So sorry, you don't meet our requirements. And that's why you need to customize your CV to the job spec. You might have a predefined CV that you might tweak a bit to meet a specific job set. And make sure you tailor it to the job spec. So if they say they're like looking for security, you might want to mention details around things that you've done in security. You maybe been a bit passionate about security or whatever. Just as an example. Or development, like these are the projects I worked on in terms of developing a program for my friend's uncle down the road or something like that. Make sure you tailor it to the job spec to show your interest as well as your skills in that.
Yep. Just to cut in quickly on that one, Sean, as well. As somebody who's read a lot of CVs, and I'm sure James and Angus have read a lot of CVs in your time, one thing that I find really difficult is when they manage to somehow match the CV to the job spec, but not in the order of the criteria that you set out in the job spec. So you've got to hunt round their entire CV to find the answers to the question. So the tip is, if they have a 5-10 item agenda of things that they want to cover, then follow them point by point in your CV as best you possibly can. That's just my personal preference. I'd rather read in a logical fashion the responses to the job spec rather than it being all over the shop. That's just my take.
The thing, if I can chime in on that, is do you need more than one resume? You don't, but can it help? Yes. When I used to do contract work, like physical security contracting, I had 4 CVs. I had one for anti-piracy and maritime security. I had one for bodyguarding. I had one for sketchy stuff, and then I had one for management type jobs, like project management or leadership positions. Obviously, the sketchy one had all a lot of guns and that kind of stuff in the experience in the resume. So it definitely does help, but it's not a necessity. The thing that people forget is when they choose a template, they'll choose a template resume and go, wow, this is a beautiful template. And chances are it is. But if that template, the way it was made, does not suit your career trajectory, where you're going, and more importantly, where you came from, people try force it, like two-pane. Everyone loves a two-pane resume these days. Developers all like two-pane this and 3 out of 5 for Java, 4 out of 5 for Python. If your career path suits that, go for it. But don't force a template. I've seen people with a 2-pane, and then the 1-pane is this small, and then it's made your resume 5-6 pages long. And people don't lead in their resume with what makes them unique, right? I always ask people when I do resume workshops, I'm like, what are you trying to achieve with this resume? A lot of people are like, what do you mean? It's like, what are you trying to achieve with this? And they go, to get a job or to get that. And I'm like, okay, if you're transitioning, have a summary. Talk about where you came from, where you are now, what you want to work towards and what you're doing to get to that future, right? If you're set in your career, you don't necessarily need a summary. If you're very involved in the community, like, make that a first point. If you're on the offensive side and you've got OSCP and OSCE and EE and all that stuff, like, run with that. If you've got a master's degree or a PhD or whatever, lead with that. People forget that the first half page of your resume is literally the most critical part. I saw someone the other day that had a 6-page resume, and on the last page was all the juicy stuff: their community involvement, speaking engagements, their starting, Tool USA and starting this and starting that. I'm like that all needs to come to the top. The first half page of resume is like, think of your resume and your career like a house. It's the front of the house. You want to have a front of house that's welcoming, that says, like, I want to come in here. People like will have a summary that's like a page long or a 3/4 page long, and it's like, firstly, that's not a summary, right? But you got all this niff-naff and trivia, and then on page 2, it's something like, you have CISSP, or you have offensive certs, or you have something from SANS, or your community engagement. That first half of the front page is paramount. You could do what Mike says. It's going to be extremely labor intensive, and it will yield results. But you just got to remember, as long as you do whatever you want, as long as that first half page of resume is good, and don't go longer than 2 pages. You can have, some people have a 1-page or a 2-page resume, which is great, and then they have a 6, 7, 8-page resume for a 15, 20-year career. There's nothing wrong with that, but you want to get your foot in the door with a 1 or 2-pager. And I sometimes will ask someone, like, if they've done something extremely technical, I'll say, like, hey, do you have something extended? And they go, yeah, sure. Then they send it. I'm more likely to read that than you. I receive a 6, 7, 8-page resume, first instance. Like today, I whined about it on Twitter, like people using Indeed templates. Like, I don't, maybe Jay's opinion about it, but I cannot stand an Indeed template because because of its structure, it makes your resumes that have 5, 6, 7 pages long, and it's not. There's no personal touch to it. But yeah, I think that was the most of my point.
Cool. Thanks. I guess, James, do you want to add anything, or?
I think between everyone, you've covered pretty much all of it. But yeah, essentially, like, your CV is, Angus alluded to, kind of the foot in the door to get the interview. It's essentially a sales document. Like, you're selling yourself. And I tend to try and think about it that, like, if a company has a job requirement, it's because they've got a problem, and they need someone to fix that problem. That's essentially why a job exists. And so you've got to kind of present yourself as the solution to their problem. So you can explain in that first bit of the resume, like, what value you're going to add, what problem you're going to fix for them, and also demonstrate that you understand what the problem is. If you can show that on, like, the first paragraph of your resume, and that's probably the bit to tailor if you're going to tailor anything, that you understand what their problem is, how you're going to fix it, and then the rest of it is just demonstrating you have the experience to do it, or the skills, or you've developed in your career to be able to do that. Yeah, but you should be able to do that in a paragraph, really. That's probably my 2 cents. Otherwise, I'm just repeating what everyone else said, but it's all good advice.
So one thing I will also add, these are more like technical things in the CV, is make sure you use a spell checker. Because remember, this is something you're using to sell yourself. So you want to make sure you use a spell checker. Check the job title and make sure, like, hey, I'm applying for this job, whatever. I recently saw one that was saying, hey, the job role was like whatever, blah blah blah, and they were saying, hey, I'm applying for job XYZ. Well, yeah, you need to make sure that it matches. Make sure you also use the same styling. I've seen CVs with different fonts all over the place. It just looks messy.
Consistency.
Exactly. Looks unprofessional. And then other kind of things that also from me when I'm reviewing CVs is maybe. So if you're out of university, I can get why you might put like you worked at I don't know, Tesco or something like that. That's maybe okay if it's your first job or maybe your second job, but if it's maybe about time to your third job and that, I'm not really worried that you worked at Tesco's. I'm more interested in your most recent past. So put previous experience down to the most relevant roles to the job application, and then put something like a previous other roles on available on request. So if they want to, they can find out more. They don't need to. You don't need to read, and that goes to Angus's point where it can extend your CV to like over 2 pages. As well as your skills. Don't list every single skill that you have. Just list the skills that are relevant to that actual specific job.
Yeah.
I don't need.
If I can add to that, you want something for there to be discussed on an interview. You want recruiters to say like, hey, there's something here. It's not quite everything. Like that's why you want to start that conversation. If you list everything, what's the point in me talking to you? You know?
Yeah.
Well, I once heard, and I'd be interested to hear Angus and James's view on this, that you should never go back more than 3 years in your career history if your career history is longer than 3 years, unless it's particularly relevant. So just list the last few years of your actual job.
I'd say like my perception is like 10 years. If you've done something before 10 years, that is like super like some legitness, right? Or it's something that is adds a lot of weight to your candidacy now, then add it. But as soon as you start getting to that like 8 to 10 year point, what I suggest is, as you've had in your resume, you're gonna have, you know, your job title, you know, the company you work for below that, and the date on the right. All you do then at the bottom of the resume, when you get to those 10 years, you can just do one-liners. If you did a job pre 10 years ago that is like, I don't know, you walk dogs for a living, or you painted houses. Unless you're getting a security job with a company that paints houses now, like it's not gonna, if it doesn't add value to your candidacy, like don't leave it. But anything 10 years before, if it was help desk or whatever, you just have a one-liner. You have the title, company you work for, and the dates. That way someone can ask about it and the information is there, but there's not bullet points with it and substantiation. But not 3 years. 3 years is very short.
I think this is also where your LinkedIn profile comes into it. So include your LinkedIn profile, and then if people are interested in finding out more about your past experience, they can go to your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, you can Jack and Ori, or I think that's the term they use in the UK. You can, on a summary on your resume, you want like a paragraph, right? Max. LinkedIn, you can go crazy. You can write an essay for like I might read it, I might not read it, but LinkedIn, you can add the, you know, pre 10 years, you can have the bulky information. But on your resume, like 10 years, like one line it.
Yeah. And that's
something just on what Mike said as well. The something we look for is like, particularly if you're going for more senior jobs, is progression. And that generally shows potential, which, because we're not just assessing people for like the job now, particularly the way everything is changing so quickly. We're also assessing for the future job that role is going to become. So we're looking for, have you grown through your career? Have you developed? Have you progressed at previous companies? Which is something to pick up on, actually, because I see this varies a lot on different CVs. Some people will list like a company and then the last role that they left at, and they won't list any other roles. I would recommend putting in, if you progressed at a company, like making that evident on your CV, because that's really powerful. It shows that you were good at your job, that people thought highly of you, and you actually did progress, and also that you learned and developed new skills in a business. And that's something that pretty much every employer wants, because it's really like, from a recruitment perspective, you buy talent in, so you kind of hire externally, or you buy contractors, or you build that talent yourself. Fast growing companies can't buy talent fast enough, so you have to build it to be able to sustain your company growth. And it's also works out a lot more economically viable as well for companies. So you want to hire people that will develop. So yeah, definitely evidence growth on your CV, through those kind of leaving those job titles in, and progression at previous companies.
One thing I want to add to that, just really shortly, if you've worked for a company for a long time, like I think Dark Wolf here said he's worked for the same company for 10 years, to it's very difficult to now summarize 10 years worth of work. But what works well and what can tie in with what James has said is you can have your job title, like the last job title you had with the company title, and then dates, and then under that you can just list like 3-4 bullet points of like this camera things are working very well. You can list 3-4 bullet points of what you've done in that title as a senior security engineer. But maybe before you were senior security engineer at, let's say, Zoom, right? Before that you were a software engineer, right? Then you have below that you have software engineer. You don't put the company details in, just software engineer, and then the dates. And maybe you join Zoom as an analyst. Then at the bottom you go security analyst and the dates. That shows that allows you to put a long duration job into context, and it shows that progression. And it's something I look for. If someone has promoted like rapidly in a job, it's always a good sign, because that person's going to work hard. They want to achieve things. They're going places. Like there is professional intent from that person. Like when I left the military, the problem is, what is my experience? I did some construction before I joined the army, and then I spent 6 years in the military. So when I had my resume getting out the army was like 1 page, but I broke it up into recruit, private, then I was a gunner, and then I was a singler for a year and a half, and then I became a commander for 3 years. So I broke that up. As soon as I had one job out the army, I condensed that to 2 pieces. So now I had my second job out the army became 1 piece, and now it's like 2 sentences. So it's just something I wanted to add.
Cool. Yeah, great points. So moving on, you've done your CV. Now you get your phone call saying, "Hey, we're interested in you. Come in for your first interview." So tips on interviews. Who wants to go first?
And screw it up.
Do some homework on the company that you're going to go and have your interview with. Okay, that's a really important thing. So one of the questions I ask in an interview after the icebreaker and people are settling down a little bit is tell us a little bit about what you know about our organization. And that's just to test how much they care about the company they're applying to work for. And it impresses me when they can tell us about how old the company is and who the CEO is and what our line of business is, and things like that, a bit of the structure of the company. I find that really valuable, and it shows a little bit of a level of giving a shit about the firm that you've gone for the interview with. One pro tip that I will tell you if you're in security is do not come into an interview and tell me you've hacked my website or port scanned it or any of that stuff, because that won't impress me much. That's all I wanted to say for the time being.
Yeah, if that was me, you'd probably have an interview by the law enforcement at that stage.
I've had that happen. Someone, I always advise, like, you got to do research on the company, find as much as you can, good and bad, so you have all the right questions. But I've had someone that on an interview, they had done a lot of research on the people interviewing them, and then they said that they made the statement, "Hey, such and such, you really have your stuff locked down well." And what they meant by that was like their Facebook settings are good, so that it only shows a certain amount of information. Immediately, this person went like DEFCON 5 or whatever. Like they called security and they're like, "What do you mean?" Like then the guy had to call his family and like change the passwords and like hit the panic button, like go crazy. They mentioned what they said out of context, so make sure. Like I will do in-depth research on the people I'm interviewing with. And then the person says, like, "What do you know about the company?" I'm like, blah, 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 blah. "Oh, and you studied at Edinburgh University." Right? I did that once with a security company and they were super impressed by it. But don't disclose as much. If you find somebody that got like a sketchy, subscription on, Pornhub or whatever, I wouldn't say like, "Oh, I like your comments that you made there." So do your research, but don't be overt with it, and don't hack the job unless you're asked to do it. I know people though that have done sketchy stuff, and then like the thought process of, you know, to get the job, you know, get into the CEO's office. Like, I know people that have done that, but more times than not, it's not going to end well for you.
No,
But
agreed.
100% do your research. Just, yeah, don't rip the arse out of it.
Yeah. So stay well in the bounds of the law is more or less what I think you should do. So things like, as Angus pointed out, always intel and that kind of stuff is fine because that's lawful. It's public knowledge. But also be aware that it may come across as stalking a bit. So you also don't want that too much. So just be careful. I think is the word.
I've just a couple more thoughts from my own experience. It's often, I think, interview candidates often forget that the people interviewing the panel or the individual one-to-one or whatever, however it's constructed, are often equally as nervous as you are, because recruiting people is not their day job, right? They're there delivering a service or running a team. So be at ease perhaps a little bit that the fact that the person sat at the other side of the table is probably crapping themselves in the same way that you might be, because they're not experienced in interviewing people, because it's a skill that they don't often use. So that's a really important thing. And interviewing is a skill, and not all organizations train their personnel, their hiring managers, on interviewing skills. So it can be quite a clumsy experience for everybody concerned at times. So the interviewer, the team, or the individuals asking the questions might stumble through the questions and make a right arse of the questioning, which can make it difficult for you to answer. So just be mindful of that experience. It can happen. And if you don't understand the question, don't fluff your answer and bullshit. Ask them to repeat the question to you, so you've got a second or even third opportunity to absorb the question that's being asked. Because if you do that and you fully understand the question that you're being asked, there is a higher likelihood that you'll give a better answer to the question. That's a mistake I've made quite a few times in my career earlier on, where I've kind of thought I gave a great answer, but I didn't really actually answer the question at all. I just said a load of words that lasted 3 minutes. And then
I do that a lot.
You get back to the car afterwards and you think, oh, right, I know exactly the mistakes I made, and then you don't hear a thing. So that's just a couple of early points I wanted to make.
The thing is, a lot of times a company in an interview might ask you a question like if they've taken a solid time to understand your skill set and experience in your resume, right? They will ask you a question potentially that they know most likely you will know nothing about, right? And the reason for that is sometimes it's a bit to like shock you a bit and like see what you do under pressure. But a lot of times with that, what they're trying to look at is how do you as an individual and a professional tackle a problem? Like, what is your thought process? What is your methodology? Just because you answer that question 100% correct, like it's that it doesn't matter. If you can show them that your thought process, like if they ask you like on a coding test, right? They'll say, okay, we're using this and what we want you to do this with it, and we believe this might be a problem. If you haven't used a scripting language, you can say, well, okay, I haven't used the scripting language, right? But I'm very proficient with this. So the way I would tackle it is this way. I would ensure I do this, this, and this. And at the end, the result should be this, and this is the data will be pulled from it. By being able to answer a question that you don't know the answer to shows how you can solve the problem. Like, you do ever get questions like Google. I've watched a lot of talks from how Google did recruiting. And they used to ask like brain teasers. Like the one I always remember is they used to ask people, if you walk 1 mile south, 1 mile east, and 1 mile north, and you're in the same place, where are you? And it just like stumps people. And that was to see how people abstractly resolve problems. From what I understand, Google don't do that anymore. But there is some companies that will ask you a brain teaser just to like shock the system a bit. So just like breathe and just answer it as best as you can. By the way, the answer is the North or the South Pole.
So another thing to add, please, like it's probably now more so than before with remote interviews and that. I've been on the interviewing person side of things. ask them a technical question, you hear a long pause, and then a clankering of a keyboard, and then like a verbatim answer being spat out. If you do not know the answer, just simply say, look, I don't know the answer, and as Angus pointed out, probably leverage some of your skills, like I don't know much about Ruby, so I would be, hey, I don't know much about Ruby, but I've been developing for X amount of years. I'm quite comfortable going off to Google, trying to pick up some tutorials and learning it. Much better than trying to clank away at your keyboard and then give her like a word-for-word answer that's on Stack Overflow or something. You will be caught out pretty quickly. So
Yeah, agreed.
Don't be it.
And I think another thing that's worth pointing out is that at the end of the interview, if you're not specifically asked about something and you think it's worth mentioning, then mention it. So if they don't ask you about, we've talked a lot about community engagement and doing all these extracurricular things. If it's relevant and you spend 3 hours a night or a couple of hours a week on the weekend building labs and hacking them, yeah, or learning new scripting languages or new programming languages has been mentioned, then say so, because it's extra value. What you're showing is that you care enough to go out and use your initiative and your own time to learn new stuff. And I think that's incredibly valuable. Don't tell them that you collect rabbits and all that kind of stuff. I don't think they're going to be particularly interested in that, unless, of course, you're going for a career in zoology, in which case maybe. But yeah, if you go out of your way to do stuff you're not getting paid for in your current job, then mention it, because I think that demonstrates to me a level of commitment and interest in the subject. So I always think that's worth doing.
So we have a question from Dan asking, how would you approach questions such as where do you see yourself in 5 years? So from my point of view, that's just assessing someone's aspirations, their kind of drive, their motivations. It's a difficult question to answer, but as someone asking that, I'm not looking for explicit answer like, hey, I expect to be a manager by this time. It's just assessing how motivated you are to move forward. How motivated are you to learn things? And that's also to like Jane's point earlier, like, are you going to progress yourself forward? And that's sometimes it's perfectly okay to stay in the same position and not wanting to move forward. Some people are perfectly happy with that, and that suits some companies like ideally. So sometimes it's okay to say, look, I don't see myself moving forward. I'm happy to stay that. But I imagine many people on the call are probably students or early in their careers. And that's probably something you probably won't do at this stage. That's kind of when you get towards retirement stage, you're probably going to be perfectly happy. Just
I avoid that question.
I hate
been doing something for 20, 30 years.
Yeah. I hate the question. I absolutely hate it. And I would never dream of asking it in an interview. I can see two sides to it. On the one hand, it speaks to James's point earlier on about you wanting to see evidence of somebody's that might be coming into the company on day one in this role, but you may have a role prepared for 3-5 years down the line that you want to see where their thought processes are and where their aspirations lie. So I get it from that point of view. But for me, if that question was asked, I would find it perfectly acceptable for the candidate to answer, listen, mate, I don't know where I'm going to be next year or in 6 months, because you look at people's backgrounds on LinkedIn, and you guys have seen it more than me. People hop from career to career in technology. It's not uncommon for say a web developer to move from company to company inside an 18-month period. It's not frowned upon. It's just the way it is. They want fresh projects, and people get bogged down in legacy software and fixing bugs and stuff, and they get fed up with that and they want to move on. So I don't think it's not something I prefer. It wouldn't be something I'd go out my way to include in an interview, but I do see both sides to it.
Go,
James. After you.
I was going to say, just on that point, like in today's world, 5 years is a really long time. There is a lot of stuff changing. So I would use this question to show like that you're thinking a little bit bigger picture than that, and kind of tell them what you're interested in. So like, I don't know, right now I'm interested in doing blah, 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 blah. So that's what I'm pursuing at the moment. And like, then you can explain like technology changes. Like, there's always like new tools, new techniques to learn as well. So if someone's asking you that 5-year question, one, their interview question is probably out of date, but you can demonstrate your understanding of how fast the world is moving and say, like, in 2 years, I'm probably going to be using a different technology and my job at the moment might not exist. So 5 years planning is like ridiculous. So kind of touching on Mike's point, but yeah, you can demonstrate other thinking through that question as well.
I think you can, but I think it can be done in a more elegant way. And going back to your point, James, about it being an outdated question in terms of the wording that's used. So maybe asking the 5-year question is not the way to go about doing it now. It's about saying to the candidate, well, you're coming in as a junior SOC analyst or a senior analyst or an engineer or whatever. That's, should you be successful, that's where you're going to be placed in the organization. What's next for you? Yeah. So where do you want to go after that? I think that's maybe a better way and a more comfortable way of putting it to the candidate, rather than just saying, hey, where are you going to be in 5 years? Because people just don't have a decent answer for it. I think you gave a good answer, but I don't think it's something that a lot of people will have.
I see someone commented there saying I've also heard that spinning that what is your biggest weakness into positive annoys people. Like, I think I asked that question, like, what do you feel is your biggest weakness, when I started recruiting, and then I just realized, like, I hated getting asked this question when I was a contractor, so I literally don't ask it. James could maybe comment on, like, if spinning that into something positive, like, my biggest weakness is I'm a workaholic, or my biggest weakness is, I'm just that good a coder, or whatever. I tend to not ask that. Pertaining to the 5-year plan, I always ask people, like, where do you want to be in 5 years? I always ask, like, usually with people transitioning, like, especially people going out of the military, I say, right, you're getting out of the military in July. Like, what is the plan? What is there's always two parts. What are you good at, and what do you want to do? Sometimes there's a big disparity between the two. So what I'll ask is, like, what is your plan? Like, ideal world, what do you want to be doing next, and what are you working towards? I tend to get good answers with that, and people say, like, okay, so I'm getting out, hopefully we can get this job as an analyst, and then I want to get my STAN cert, so I want to do my OSCP or whatever, and then move over into something more offensive, or I want to go DFIR. I don't like asking the 5-year question. That's why I always ask, like, what's the dealio? What's the plan?
Yeah, good points. Another point I want to make is in terms of interview. Now, this is something that's not easy to do, but it's something that you will build up over time, is trying to be confident in your interview. Like, think of steps that you got there. So often, especially if you're out of the gates, many people might have applied for the job. So already you one step ahead of many people. That's something you should be proud of. And the reason why I say this is, as you go in the interview, trying to be confident in yourself means you're going to come across in a way much better, and selling yourself. Think of it this way. If you go into a car dealership and then you go and say, hey, I want to go buy that car, and you got someone timid going, yeah, I guess this, or well, this, and I think it does this and that, you're probably not going to buy that car, versus someone going, that's an excellent car for these reasons, it's going to give you this mileage, you're going to get years of service out of it, etc., etc. You're probably going to buy the car from that person. That's what an interview is. You're selling yourself. So it is easy to say that and saying, hey, you need to be confident in yourself, but it is something that you should work on. But also, a word of caution, there is a distinction between being confident in yourself and come across as arrogant. You don't want to come across as arrogant and someone who thinks they know everything on that, because that can also set a bad taste and come across wrong. So it's also a fine line. But trying to get in a way that you can sell yourself with confidence is going to place you above other candidates, because it proves that you have confidence in yourself, and if you've got confidence in yourself, you're going to do well. You're going to do well in your job and that kind of thing.
For me, it's about, if I ask someone a question or call, bear in mind, I technically, or in theory, I don't do interviews. I do what's called a clearing call, right? So I just make sure you match what the company is looking for, and I get a bit of a feel for who you are, so I can pitch you well. if I ask people questions and they give me extremely like not nippy answers, but like I'll say so. Okay, so what I'd love to know is, what's your story? What got you started? And led to what you do now, for a living. And they go, well, I finished school and then I joined the army and here I am. I'm like, okay, like I have had a lot of calls where it's like blood from stone, where I literally have to like wrench the information out of you. That always, unless someone is neurodiverse, um, that is always for me, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a psychologist, but that always to me breeds the fact that you are not confident in this. And I'm like, are you gonna have more like eagerness when you go with a client? So that's why I always advise, especially if I have candidates that are a bit not suggestive with information. I almost want people to answer a question to a detail, and I'm like, okay, no, that's cool. Okay, I'm happy with that. Like, don't just give me like a yes, no, and then move on with your day. Because then I'm like, you got to remember, I've got to write I write proposals on people. Sometimes I'll write a 2-page proposal on a candidate. Sometimes it's only 2 paragraphs, but I need to be able to pitch you in the best light to a client, right? So that they say, you know what, this is the person we want to speak to. We want to speak to him yesterday, right? If you are very short with your answers, it breeds problems. What I tend to do with candidates that I believe maybe they're just untrusting, which is fine, or they lack a bit of confidence, I'll say, okay, like, we'll do some questions, and then I'll say, okay, cool, listen, I need to chat to the client, I need to get a bit more information about them, about the role, and I'd love to do a follow-up call. A lot of times I find on that follow-up call, the people will be a bit more at ease and a bit more chilled and be more suggestive. Then I feel confident sending the client. I'll never send someone over to a company unless unless I know they're going to do decently at an interview. So it's just like a piece of us. Like, be as suggestive with information as you can be. Don't shoot yourself in the foot, but just give information until you get like the read the room, like, okay, you've said enough now.
So can I comment?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
I usually am the most vocal one. So I know it's not Friday, but it's Thursday. So so I have a few comments about what you just said. So first of all, I am massive on imposter syndrome. And as Mike said, this is a really small community, so we are surrounded by experts. Like I had a mini panic attack like a few weeks ago because I started my blog. Yes, I started my blog and it's not going very well because I don't write, but I opened LinkedIn, and within LinkedIn, I follow a number of people like Lisa Forte, for example. Like you follow these people that are experts, and you can get so down on yourself because you don't have your podcast, you don't know all these people personally, you just transitioning, or you haven't been working for like few months or several months, or how do you build up that confidence that you go and you can sell yourself? Like, I know I have certain skills, but like comparing to everyone else that I follow, like, yeah. So how do you do that? Any insight?
I think it's, for me, the important thing, what I try to sort of tell people or teach people, is like, a lot of people think in an interview process that the company is like, they have all the power, like they're gonna crush your dreams or they're gonna make it happen for you and you're gonna get that dream job. The fact of the matter is, you as a candidate possesses true and ultimate power, right? People forget that they don't have a say, they don't possess power, because the fact of the matter is, say now you go through the interviews, maybe you have 2, 3, 4 interviews and an on-site and a tech test, and you smash them all, and that company goes to you, you know what, we're going to make an offer, we're offering you £350,000 and a car and flights and business class and all that stuff. You could just say no thank you, right? So you possess power by understanding that you hold equal, if not more, power in an interview. Like that's what I did, because turns out I'm really bad at interviews, or sometimes, right, when I'm the one being interviewed. So, and reminding yourself that at the end of the day, I can say no to this job should help you remember that, you know, you know, there's value in you, because right at the end of the process, you can just say, I'm not interested. Um, how you deal with imposter syndrome is a tricky one. I get it sometimes. Every now and the other day, I had a meltdown because I want to become a digital forensics and incident response engineer or analyst or specialist, and sometimes I struggle with Kali, and I'm like, I forget the command to start my VPN, and I'm like, you know, and I see these big people I'm big friends with, and what they're achieving. I'm like, this is gonna take me years. I gotta maybe get a degree. I gotta start. Like it kills me. But that's when I go back to the community and I say like, hey, you know, peeps, I need to like have a bit of a heart to heart here, and then I express myself, and I'm like, that's why TJ and L helped me the other day. I had a meltdown about not knowing anything, and then he's like, right, you know, have you got a plan? And I'm like, yeah, of course. He's like, what's your plan? Show me your plan, right? So when I get down some about my, you know, ineptitude in this industry, I go back to the community and I bounce it off, you know, people. I always have my door open. If someone wants to call me on Discord and say, hey, you know, I need help, or I need to chat about things, then I'm always make myself available, and that's one of the cool things about the industry. So summarize: one, you've got a lot of power in an interview process, and two, like, turn to the community, and like, all these people are achieving big things, but chances are you'll achieve the same things.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, Angus. And just to add to your points around the general issue of imposter syndrome, I'm yet to meet an InfoSec professional, anybody actually, that doesn't have it, that doesn't actually have some degree or other of imposter syndrome. I get it all the time. So when I started blogging, my imposter syndrome was, who the hell wants to read the crap that I'm going to write? Okay, because they don't know who I am. And I'm going to write some stuff on a blog site, and I'm going to post it out, links to it on Twitter. And I immediately expected a pile on, you're talking crap, you don't know what you're talking about, get out the industry and all that kind of stuff. But the way I dealt with imposter syndrome, and it's not the way everybody will deal with it, but it's by kind of doing stuff. And to the point that Angus made about the community, and the point I made that you picked up on around the size of the community, you've actually got a lot of friends, and you've got a lot more friends than perhaps you realize at times. And there is absolutely no damage or harm in bouncing stuff off a colleague. So say you've written a paper, or you've written a blog, or you're studying for something, or you've created a CV and you want to apply for a job. There is no harm, and you will meet little or no rejection from people if you say, hey, would you mind having a quick look at this for me and reading through it? And I guarantee that 99% of the time, people will give you that time of theirs just to look through your CV. We're not experts. That's another point I wanted to make. No one's an expert. So anybody that tells you that they're an expert or posts on their Twitter bio that they're an expert is a liar. At the end of the day, no one is an expert. The day we stop learning things is the day that we become at one with the cosmos, and we all should just go home and forget about it, because you become God at that point, and that doesn't exist. So, yeah, again, to summarize, everyone suffers imposter syndrome to one extent or another. And I know people that are really significant in the industry, and Sean does too, and I'm sure a few other people do, that worry about things all the time. Yeah, whether they made the right move, whether that tweet they posted was the right thing to do, and so on and so forth. But if you need a little bit of support and validation, then just reach out. I mean, you can reach out to anybody in the beer farmers. I guarantee it. You'll get a response. Angus, you're always available to chat with people, as you just mentioned there on Discord or whatever. Just speak to people, because we're not here to judge you. We're here to help at the end of the day.
The other thing I want
to
add...
and sorry, I'm just going to say one thing. Okay. Yes, and this is my experience. And you know this, Mike. You know, like, I've been very vocal about this. That everyone has been really welcoming and friendly. So I get it. And I do have friends. I recognize that. So yeah, thanks.
So, Troy Hunt, Lisa Forte, Jason Street, on and on and on and on. Guess what? They didn't just suddenly start out with this magic, or the knowledge they have, and all the confidence they had, and all of that kind of stuff from day one. It's slowly built up over time. So just because you're not there now doesn't mean you can't get to that kind of level or the equivalent. So focus on yourself. You're your own person. You have your own journey, and if you're determined to get there, as Mark suggested, reach out to the community, and you will get there. People are more than willing to help, especially those at the top, like Lisa and Jason, E Street, and Troy, and that they're very helpful and they're always willing to help. So yeah, so imposter syndrome's important. It is a thing, but also realize you're not alone, and everyone faces it. Everyone's started off at a beginner, and you just got to work your way up from there. So there was a question from MJ Yule again. Is it possible to ruin your chances by opening yourself to Twitter in a kind of political aspect? So I'd say politics can get really tricky. It shouldn't reflect in terms of employment, but politics can get nasty. So what I will say to that is conduct yourself in a way that doesn't make you come across in bad light. So basically, don't be a dick. If you respectful of other people, you civilized, I don't see why there would be an issue in terms of your political lines. Obviously, be careful about who you align with politically. If there's some maybe really extreme ultra group and that, you might want to be careful about associating yourself with that. I'm talking like really extreme. So that's my point there. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything. Oh, sorry, one more thing. I just personally keep politics out of it. I just find it simpler. But yeah, that's me.
I think another part of that question, which is really important, and that's really for Angus and James, is do recruiters do Osen on the individual via their social media?
So a little bit is probably the answer to that. We've got tools now that do a lot of it for us. So they stack up all of your kind of internet profiles in one place, and just aggregate it all, and then it's very easy. So we can find all those profiles fairly straightforward. So sometimes we look at that. I wouldn't say most recruiters have time to do like a lot of research. If we look at your CV and you happen to have included like your GitHub repo on there and your Twitter handle and things, we might go look at them, but that might only happen when we actually get to kind of interview or offer stage, that we'll then maybe do a little bit more. We're definitely not like stalking people on the internet. There just generally isn't the time to do it in recruitment. Yeah. Like we're handling 200 plus kind of candidates like on a day sometimes, and you don't have time to be researching everyone.
If I get a feeling about someone or a hunch about someone, I'll ask them some more questions. And if I still don't feel I have to have utmost confidence and feel super comfortable with you before I send you somewhere, because it's my reputation that's on the line as well. Yes, sometimes I get it wrong. I've had candidates that manage to BS their way through me, and then when they get to a technical interview with the client's like, what the hell is this trash, right? It's like, that's when people have just completely BS their entire sort of portfolio, right? But if I have a funny feeling about someone, I will look into them, and I'll go and I'll look for if they have like arrest warrants. Like I've caught people that have like, they get weird. I'm like, why is there a big gap in your resume? And then they're like umming and ahhing, and turns out they have like a federal indictment for DMCA or I forgot what's it DMA DMCA. yeah, that's basically it. If I don't get a funny feeling about you, I'm not going to look into. I'll always, if you have your Twitter there, I'll ask if you're on Twitter, and I'll look at your Twitter, and I'm like, oh, there's a really good memes like happy days. I'll look at your GitHub. I'll look at your blog. Um, as long as there's something like not super, off the books. Because I have to be worried. Like if you, it's I'm all for your right to vote. I'm all for having a political opinion, but if I am not confident that you can't keep the two separate, and you're not gonna use an interview to preach your ideology, like then I probably wouldn't send you. Like by all means, have these opinions and whatever, but just if you can't keep them separate, it's like when we used to be bodyguarding. What the first thing they teach you in bodyguarding is with a client, you have no opinions. They say they like golf, and you go, "Oh, that's interesting." And they ask you, "Do you like golf?" And you go, "I'm not sure." Right? No sex, politics, and religion, because then you say the wrong thing to the wrong client, and then it's like a wound. It'll fester and fester. So that's why no sex, politics, religion when it comes to the workplace. I think is usually the safest bet. Well, on the weekends, like do whatever you want.
Cool. So we had a question from Dan. So he's struggling to find jobs in his area. Um, any suggestions around how best to look for jobs? That obviously, if you have to be in the office, that has to be in your area. But this is maybe perhaps finding jobs that are maybe more remote. Dan, please correct me if I'm wrong, or if it's finding jobs that the employers are probably maybe even willing to pay for your relocation.
I can cover this. So I would say don't think about looking for jobs to start with. If you want to look locally, think about like where you want to work, like what companies or what do you want to do. So a good way to think about it is like, what job do I want? So let's go find someone doing that job. And then, so you kind of like reverse searching instead on LinkedIn. So you find like, I don't know, yeah, someone who's doing like a security analyst job. Type into LinkedIn, security analyst, see how many come up. You can then filter them by like location. So you can then see the location they're at, see what companies they're working at. That gives you like a short list of companies that you should be approaching that are likely hiring or will hire at some time for the jobs that you want to do. And then you can just kind of find who is the hiring manager for those companies. Generally, it's like just you either scour kind of the company list of people, or you just kind of put in a bit of a Boolean search to kind of find like IT managers or security managers or something like that, and then just connect with them on LinkedIn. Like you can connect with as many people as you want, put a little message in there, and they'll generally share jobs when they do come up. But if you do an intro beforehand to kind of a hiring manager at a company you want to work at, and tell them like why you want to work there, what sort of job you're looking for, or what you want to do, and the benefits that you can bring, you're going to stand out beyond everyone else that just kind of looks on Indeed and applies to the first thing that they see with a Indeed template CV. So that's probably my recommendation of finding jobs. Like stop job searching, find companies instead and people.
Oh, I guess you're mute.
Microphone. There we go. No, I was saying that was solid, good advice. No, I 100% agree with that. A lot of people are very anti using a recruiter. So perhaps if they see an agency post a job, and trust me, I do this. It's a very good BD technique. Is they will take the job description and they'll start running like string searches on Google to find the original job. Like just a sucky thing to do, but by all means go for it. But the cool thing about dealing with an agency recruiter, but it's one that you can build a bit of trust with, and that you believe understands what your skill set is, can pitch you well, and actually supports your sort of career growth, is a lot of times the right person. Usually, this is pre-COVID. COVID has like changed the landscape a bit. Like defense is up, commercial is down. Is that an agency has a unique ability potentially, right, to take you do one call with us, but we're able to pitch you to 4 or 5 different companies. The best thing for us is when we have multiple companies that do sort of the same thing or working in the same space, recruiting roughly the same thing. So usually Silicon Valley for us, that's like application security engineering, infrastructure security engineering, and red teaming or pen testing. A lot of times, usually before like doom and gloom now, if I get a good pen tester, I can pitch them to about 7 different companies. That means you're not going to have to go hunt. You're not going to have to put all that effort in. Like, we do all of that for you, and we pitch you differently to each different company to give you the best shot. The other side is getting involved with the community. I think one of the big acid tests now for sort of your place in the community, however big or how small it is, and I've discussed with people, like I've wondered, like if I personally, me Angus, put out a tweet tomorrow saying, "Hey, it's all done. I'm looking for a job," I'd be keen to see like what sort of attention I get from that. But we're all super supportive, so turning to community is also a valuable thing. But don't some people make the mistake of turning to community, and then they, excuse my French, but they look a gift horse in the mouth and they go, that's not really my thing. Like if you're down some and you haven't worked for months, like, I've done some pretty grim jobs in my day to put food on the table, right? You do it because you have to. It doesn't mean you're gonna do that job for 2-3 years, but yeah, be turning back to the community can definitely help. Just use that attention efficiently.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm I'm a prime example of turning to the community. So yeah, it like networking is really really important. And one other thing I will also add is like if you see a job there, and I think this is going to be more relevant now than ever before, with the whole COVID stuff and people adapting, or rather companies adapting to the way people work now, is remote working. So it might be worth, if there's a really good job and you might be interested in saying like, hey, look, I noticed this job's for whatever location. I actually happened to have this at the beginning of the year, and unfortunately the job didn't work out. But like I said, like, hey, I'm really interested in this job, but I'm based in Scotland and the job's based in, I don't know, Bristol. Is there any possibility that it's open to remote working? And I think now more than ever that's probably going to be, you might receive an answer like maybe half of the time, I don't know, but you might receive an answer like saying, hey, yes, actually we possibly think about that. So it's always worth asking that, even if the job roles specified somewhere that you don't live. And what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no.
Yeah, that's something we've seen in the landscape now, where usually if we advertise a job that's remote, we'll say it's remote. A lot of times that is limited. So if the company is based in the US and we say remote, that tends to be remote within the US. A lot of people just don't get that. But sometimes we'll have remote jobs that like it's open to Five Eyes. So US, Canada, the UK, and Europe and Australia, right? Especially when you get to like research jobs that don't necessarily need you to clock in at 9 or 8 in the morning and clock out at 4. Um, it's worth asking, and a lot of times some jobs, especially now, like COVID has highlighted this massively, and I'm really excited for this. Is sometimes the job is advertised and that company would consider taking on someone remotely despite it not being advertised as a remote job. The ideal will always be someone that's near that office, that can commute to that office. That is always the gold standard. But a lot of companies will take someone remotely, and sometimes they'll take a remote internationally. It's just remote internationally tends to be quite rare.
It also depends. Oh, sorry, Karen.
It was me. I have a question as far as the remote US jobs being for US. Like I wasn't sure, I don't know if you know if there's more of a tendency one way or another, but is it because of the location or is it because of the legal status? Because I've been applying for US remote jobs because I'm a US citizen, so I can like legally work in the United States, but I'm physically located in Europe. So I don't know if that is typically okay or not.
It can be from a, it could be potentially from a compliance perspective, like the company might not want to put the effort in to like a simple thing like paying you. You think it is quite simple, but it can be tricky. I have a client in the UK now that will consider someone from pretty much anyone within about an hour of their time zone.
Mhm.
But they now have to put new infrastructure in place. They have to relook at the employment contracts, and they said, like, we probably can't take them as a full-time person, but we take them. We in essence going to make them full-time, but they have to have their own company so we can pay them. So that's where it gets tricky.
So for me, I have a US bank account. I have like my parents' address that I could use as like my official address. It's
Yeah.
just that I would be remote, but like traveling all the time, essentially.
Yeah, it depends. It depends, like I mentioned earlier. Like if the kind of job you're going for is a I hate to say the word like standard. Like if it's a job that needs you to be working at a certain time,
Hmm.
it can be something tricky. Like me, I sleep till like 10, 11 in the morning. I'm trying to cut back on that, but it's because I work till 2, 3 in the morning. Why? Because I work till 4 o'clock Pacific Standard, right?
Hmm.
I don't work Fridays. Every second Friday when I have my daughter, I don't work on a Friday. But I have to match those hours, and a lot of times companies will be like, "You say you're okay with this, but would you really be
Yeah,
up for working till 2 in the morning most days?" Um,
totally. Absolutely.
yeah, but it's just at the on the face of it, think of it, your resume and your application, they might look and go, but you're in the UK, like this isn't going to work. So that's where I think was it Sean or James that advised, like, don't think of it as a job, think of it as a company. Like if you can get talking to that company, especially HR and recruiting, the reason they are super keen to talk to you usually is because they don't have to pay people like me, right? They don't have to burn through their outsourcing budget. If you can get, yeah, except for, yeah, James, me and James will work together one day, I'm sure. It saves them money. It saves them money. So if you speak directly to the company, it can help. So, think about what James said. And if not, then just speak to me and I'll I'll get you
So,
in there.
so,
Yeah.
so the other thing is like, even though you mentioned, yeah, you say you work at you live with your parents and that, you got to look at it from the company's perspective. You're still working in the UK, so it still might put them as a liability, and that's maybe something that they're not willing to risk.
For
And,
sure. And I don't mean like I would lie to the company. Like I wouldn't pretend that I live there, but like as far as paperwork is
yeah,
concerned, is more.
yeah. I mean, as soon as you start going down that route, there's so many different things in terms of law and employment law, and that it gets like, I'm no lawyer, so I can't comment on this. But certainly in some instances, like UK now has a pension law. If you're employed by a company, you have to pay a pension. Now, if you're a US company, you suddenly have to pay in a UK pension pot, and you're gonna have to pay, like, how does that work? And it's a whole extra cost. Um, that's why if you're looking for remote work, like companies that have offices around the world, it's going to be a lot easier to say like, hey, I want to work in, I don't know, Dublin. Well, they got an office in Dublin. Okay, well then that's quite simple. It's not always the case, but that's maybe where some companies are coming from, why they might be a bit hesitant.
And there could be also personal tax complications, because I think there is something like you have to be in a certain country for so many days in a year to pay tax within that country. So something like that. I'm not 100% familiar with that, but there's definitely something
That's why
around
usually with
tax.
something cross-border, they'll say like you're gonna have to set up your own company. When I started doing contracting work, I got in with an accounting company. I paid them 250, 300 pound, and they helped me set up not a shelf company, but like an offshore company, and then I could manage my tax that way because companies wouldn't employ me as Charles. They would employ me as Charles Pty Limited, which is kind of cool because you can, deduct tax deductibles and all that stuff. But it is possible to get a international remote job. It just depends on what kind of work you do, and also it depends on the company. But yeah, it's not easy, but it is possible.
Just a
But
side
don't
note-
worry, Lindsay, they're just going to find you a job.
Yeah.
Like now you have made all these contacts. They are going to find you a job. We are going to keep them accountable for finding you a job. So don't worry about it. You have it sorted.
Yeah, by all means. By all means.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention on a side note, as far as the taxes go, I actually, as a U.S. citizen living abroad, if I make above a certain amount of money, I have to pay federal taxes to the states. Even if I don't
IRS are hardcore, hey.
Yeah.
In South Africa, it's like 181 days tax free. America's like 330 days, maybe tax free.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And Lindsay, just on your kind of point as well, because I saw your previous question too. If like what you're looking for is that kind of US company or US remote, and you want to work that time zone, make it really clear on like anything you're kind of contacting companies with, whether that's your CV or kind of a cover letter or outreach, kind of what the setup is, because an instant reservation that you're going to get is, oh, she's addressed in the UK, and this is like US remote. And then they just ask like, well, what about like work rights and all of that stuff? So just cover that off when you are kind of sending out applications, and that will just avoid that reservation, and generally you'll get through to the next step then much easier.
Yeah. Well, and like I worked the bartending industry and most of that kind of stuff. Shifts that started at 3 a.m. So time is not really an issue. It's more like I live in a country where I do not speak the language super well. And I live in kind of like a factory town, like more rural in the middle of nowhere. So like it's pretty much my only option is doing the remote type stuff.
Yeah, so I think it's just making that clear. And like you can use like your parents' address or just put like US based down on there. That will help you get through the recruiter hurdle as well. Because from a recruiter's perspective, like we advertise remote roles. A lot of the time we get like applications from all over the place. And it's a case of, oh, you're not based in the country, reject. Like it's that quick sometimes. So you've got to beat that recruiter filter to make it. We're simple people. You've got to make it easy for us.
Okay.
When you're spoiled for choice as a recruiter, if you have 3 applications, you're gonna be a bit more like lenient. Because you suddenly have 100 applications in a job. I feel bad, but I'll shoot down people for like the small things. Like if you literally do not meet the job requirement in any sense, like you're gonna get rejected. But a lot of times, if I have a highly competitive position, right, that's something that I could potentially reject someone for. If there's something though in your resume that adds weight, like you're good, but you're in the UK, I would potentially drop you an email. I have literally a template to ask a query, and then I just add the little personal piece, like, hey, you're in the UK, this job's in America, like what gives? And then you're given that chance to explain yourself. But I agree with James, like if you can label that, like if you get asked a question on the application, right? Certain ATSs allow questionnaires. Say that there. Say like, hey, I'm a US citizen. I'm based in the UK. Like I'm keen and ready. Like I'm a night owl. Like hit me up. It having that there from the start will help get through that initial cut, basically.
And that's what I've been trying to do basically, is like I'm located here, but I was born in the US. I'm a legal US citizen. I'm perfectly comfortable working with central business hours, or like whatever time zone it is, pretty much.
Cool. All right. So done. CV, job application, interview, and now you've passed through all of it and you've got the job offer. So Angus, you want to take this one? I know there were 1 or 2 things that you wanted to comment on this.
Yeah, sure. I feel like I'm like drinking. I've gone from coffee to a Hunter's Dry. I think I'm like burning up a bit now, but that's fine. Okay, so my thing is, And I don't base this on my work in recruiting. I base this on my own experiences as a contractor. I used to, unfortunately, I used to go from contract to contract because contracts come and contracts go. So one thing I realized from an early onset, and that goes back to what Mike said, is building your own personal brand. So when assessing whether to accept or decline an offer, once again, you have the power, right? It's important to look at that offer from three perspectives: the short, the medium, and the long-term gain. The short-term gain is, what am I going to put in my pocket? Am I going to be able to go from a 2-bedroom apartment to a 3-bedroom apartment? Maybe get a nicer car. Maybe, be able to travel more. What is my stock options? What are the benefits? All that good stuff. Like the short term, what are you going to put in your pocket, right? In the whole sense of the word. And that is important, right? The medium term is the networking opportunity. If you can get to join a fantastic company like Immersive Labs, right, that adds a lot of networking opportunities. It's a company that's very involved in the community. It's a company that supports a lot of different initiatives. It's important to measure that up. The other medium aspect is, what am I going to gain in this job from a skills perspective? What kind of challenges am I going to face? What kind of problems am I going to resolve? Is there opportunity to grow in the company? Is there educational reimbursement? Can I do courses or learn something through that job? And the last piece is the long-term gain. And I personally, and this is a personal opinion, I feel the long term is the most important, right? So quickly, when I left the army, right, I got offered. I had like 10 job offers ready to go doing anti-piracy in the Gulf of Aden, right? It's just been, what happened was, I was leaving the army during the heyday of anti-piracy operations, right? I was getting paid $1,000 a day. It was like not really dangerous. Like, you just had to play around with barbed wire a lot, right? And then suddenly there was a new report that came out and basically reduced the size of the high risk area, and suddenly there was no jobs, right? So then I had to look for a new job, and I got 2 job offers. The one was with a very well recognized contracting company, and the other one was with a US company. Now, the US company offered me a whole lot more money per day, right? Um, but it was a company that had a bit of a bad name in the industry, just like they did some sketchy stuff, right? But the job that paid me less um, had a very good reputation. There's a lot of people working there, and I thought about, like, how is that logo going to look on my LinkedIn, and how is that going to look on my resume, right? So it's the career side, because you're going to do that job, and it's going to live on your resume for a period of time, right? And that's why throughout my career, I try to work. Yes, sometimes I had to work for a company like G4S for a while because I couldn't get another contract, right? But then I worked for companies like Aegis Defense. Aegis Defense is one of the biggest names in private military companies, right? They're the biggest contract in Iraqi history, looking after the American Corps of Engineers. I took a job with them, earning $100 a day less, but that lined me up to do other jobs with bigger companies and at a higher position. So to summarize, short-term gain, like, what are you going to put in your pocket? Medium term, what are you going to learn from that job? And what is the networking value you can earn from that company? And then the long term, like, how is it going to look on your LinkedIn? How's it going to look on your resume? Often for a career trajectory, that last aspect can sometimes be the most important. I know, and maybe this is wrong, I know when I assess someone's LinkedIn or someone's profile, if I see certain names of certain companies that people have worked for that I know have got a massively good reputation, it's going to attract me to it. It's going to make me like, want to read more. Let's read your summary. Let's read what you did. Especially like for me in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, if I'm hiring for a high-tech company, I'm looking for people from Facebook, from Google, from LinkedIn. So, consider the short and medium, but always keep in mind that long-term gain. Like, what's this going to look like? That's my hypothesis on this.
Yeah, it's only, I think, the long-term gain is really important because one of the jobs that I took at was actually my previous role, and I was perfectly happy where I was, and then I got a phone call the one day saying, "Hey, are you interested in this role?" And it was doing basically what I was doing, but the name had secure in it, and I always wanted to get involved in security, and I viewed that as an opportunity to further my career in a path that I wanted to. Unfortunately, before then, I was never in a position to have a security based role. And I took that job with the hope of actually furthering my career down the security route. And guess what? Here I am today, exactly because of that. So if I didn't take that job, I probably wouldn't have been involved in security. And it wasn't like I took that job because, you know, it was earning thousands more and all of that. I think I maybe earned a little bit more, but it wasn't like thousands more. As well, I've also turned down jobs that maybe paid a bit more, just because I felt that they weren't right for me, for whatever reason. So yeah, I can totally relate to Angus's point. Mark, James, you want to add anything?
Yeah, opportunity and identifying it and seizing it is really important in your career development. So, for those that don't know, my career history is quite interesting and not security related particularly. I've spent a long time in technology, but before I joined the company I work for, I was in the music industry as a record company boss and a manager of bands. Tell people this and they kind of go, "What?" But that's what I did. And I came into the company I now work for, not as in a security capacity, but as a business analyst. But the opportunity thing was all about looking around you and becoming spatially aware in the organization that you're in, no matter how big or small the company is, and look for problems that perhaps aren't being solved by other people. And that's how I've been successful. And that's how I got into the security position that I started in, because I quickly identified from some of the projects I was involved in that nobody was looking at security, whether it was applications, infrastructure, network, nothing. The only security that was being really done was by the guys wearing dark uniforms, walking around the building asking you for your ID. And that's a true story. And so I kind of put my hand in the air and said, "Look, who's looking at security?" And they went, "Well, nobody really." And I said, "Well, I'll do it then." And that's exactly what happened. So I moved from business analyst into a more senior role, and then into infosec analyst. Now senior. I now lead security in the organization that I work for. And that was a bit of luck, and a lot of this is down to luck. So we haven't spoken about luck much tonight at all, but luck does have a big part to play in things, or fortune, if you want to call it a different thing. But it's about chances as well, and how you take a chance and do something with it. And that's a really important piece of advice I'd give, is about being positive to the opportunities that might present themselves, and don't be afraid to take a bit of a risk and a bit of a gamble sometimes, because it can lead to some really good career outcomes for you.
Awesome. So, I think that concludes the journey, does it not?
I've got one more thing to raise, which I'd like to get some of the some feedback from the other guys. Let's say you didn't get the job, okay, and that unfortunately is a reality for a lot of people, is that you apply and you go through the process and you were unsuccessful. So whether that was your CV wasn't good enough, we talked about the CV, but you got through to the interview, but the interview wasn't great and you didn't get the job. So what are you gentlemen's thoughts on how you bounce back from that kind of experience?
I would, yeah. So I would just say, like, make sure you ask for feedback, so that you can actually improve. A lot of the time, like, you might get rejected kind of over the phone or maybe via email. Depends kind of how many people are in there and how busy your contact there is at times. But there should be feedback available from kind of everyone that you've met. So, like, as an example here, we've got like an ATS system that collects structured feedback from hiring managers. So we score against all like the same criteria for across different interviews, but we can go quite deep on that. So the recruiter will have all of that feedback and be able to kind of share it with you. And generally, like, recruiters interview a lot of people, and we talk to a lot of hiring managers. And so we can generally tell you, like, pretty concisely, like, where you need to improve and what you need to work on. Sometimes it's down to interview technique. Sometimes it's just like there's a better candidate, or someone who's like maybe a bit more experienced. Sometimes it's down to cost. But if you don't ask for that feedback, and like ask for it and have a call as well, so that you can probe further, then you'll just kind of make the same mistakes in future interviews.
Yeah, I think that's like it's a testament. It's a testament to immersive labs. I have clients that they'll take all the snippets of information from different interviews and they'll send me that feedback. And even though they've shot down one of my top candidates, I will send them like a 2-paragraph email saying like thank you, because that helps me help my candidate to say like, hey, you did really well here, but you missed out on that. They didn't like this, but this was really positive. I have a lot of clients, right, that I will push and push and push for feedback, and then they'll just go, just wasn't a fit. Sometimes, unfortunately, that is the extent of it. So always ask for feedback, yes, but unfortunately, sometimes like I'm in the middle, right? Of like I'm in a really bad relationship. I'm like, you're the kid in the middle. Like I'm the husband and here's the wife, and they're arguing, and I'm like, I can't explain to you what happened. I will always try to explain to someone what I think happened, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. But a company that gives feedback, I would rather work with a company that pays me less per person, right? But that talks to me, that communicates to me, that tells me, hey, like we love this about this candidate, we don't like this. They like feedback is a massive thing, and what companies forget about is that there is such a thing as candidate experience. You go on Glassdoor and you can read some pretty good and some pretty bad things about big tech companies in the world in how they interview people. How they interview people can often determine what they're going to be like as administrators and as managers of your career with that company. So I don't know if there's any companies that are watching this, like make sure you give feedback. It doesn't have to be extensive. If you can give someone 2 or 3 sentences that are pertinent and to the point, it adds so much weight, and someone walks away from your company with a good opinion. Because as Mike said and Sean said, this industry it's a really big, small industry. Word gets around. You hear the nicknames that people give companies. You hear like, oh, that company, no, I don't want to interview with that company. And you ask why? It's like, oh, because I've heard this about the manager, or the interviewing is like cutthroat, or this and that. So from a candidate's perspective, like always ask for that feedback, be appreciative and work on that feedback when you get it. But as companies need to get better at managing their candidates. Yes, the ones they hire, but also the ones they don't. Because say now you're hiring 10 people now, and in 2 years' time you're worth $2 billion and you're hiring 1,000 people, then that CV might be really applicable. And then you want to reach out to the person and they go, you know what? You never told me what is wrong with me, so I don't want to deal with you anymore. So that's my opinion, basically.
And keep trying.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what I want to add. Don't give up. I've been shut down more times than I can remember, and it sucks. I know I've been in this. It's horrible. But don't give up. So one scenario that actually happened to me was in university. There was a company, and they did a recruitment program, and I applied and I went through the technical tests and that, and I didn't get any further, and I was like upset, obviously, and it sucked. But guess what? I think it was about 2 or 3 years later. I was looking for a new job, and I applied to the same company, and I got a job at that company that I originally 2-3 years ago got shut down. I think I was even the same test or something. I can't remember. But the point is, don't give up. You got to dust yourself off. It sucks. Learn from it. Take it as a learning experience, and then try move forward. And it also comes down to the point that I made previously. Like, it is going to harm your confidence in that. There's no way that you can say like, oh, I didn't get the job and I'm less confident about myself. It's not. But also look at it from a perspective. Maybe my skills didn't align to that company. Maybe there's a better, and also think of it like maybe there's a better opportunity knocking on the door for me. I've actually had this, like where some roles that I didn't get, I was disappointed, but a better opportunity came along a few months later. So yeah, it sucks, but just try to move forward.
If anything, you've gained some experience in interviewing. Like, the more interviews you do, it tends to be the better you're going to get at. You know, if you do that, if you haven't interviewed with a company in years and you had first interview and you blow it, and you realize as you get in your car, or you're having I don't smoke anymore, but like you're having a smoke after an interview, and you're like, then you start running through your head like writing an exam in school, and you're like, shit, I forgot to say this. I didn't mention that. Oh, I could have answered that better. The fact is, you're going to remember a lot of those things you missed on your second interview, and more so on a third interview or like a different company. So you have gained some value out of that. You've also learned about a new company. You have had rapport with that company, and like what happened to Sean, they might come back to you in the future in a positive way. And yeah, Dan actually had a good question.
And just to add, in my case, I missed the first interview because I got the times wrong, and I missed the second interview because I got the times wrong again. So, and I still got the job. I don't know how. So
that's why with me working in the States, I have a rule. When I have to schedule an interview, like now I use Calendly, which helps massively. If I'm scheduling someone with an interview, I don't schedule interviews 1 hour before or 1 hour after midnight. That's for me. Because when I have to put it in my calendar, then my brain is like, okay, I'm in tomorrow, but this is like yesterday, but the interview is in a day. And then, so that's why an hour before or after midnight, I just don't do any scheduling. But like now I use Calendly. It helps with that.
Okay, so Dan has a question. So yeah, this is one I'm probably really terrible at. So you've been interviewed, you got the position, or been offered a position, and now they are asking how much you currently paid and how much you would like for the new role.
Basically, it's about the money talk. It's always a tricky one. Like my advice when dealing with recruiters is if you believe that recruiter understands you, can pitch you well, and has your best interest at heart, truly, right? Like I try to be. I always say discuss money, discuss what you're earning and what you're looking for. Sometimes you might be asked to substantiate a hop. So if you work for a company for 7 years, right, and you're joining a new company, right? Some people are modest and they say, I'm just looking for the same money. And I'm like, why? You've been with the same company for 7 years. If someone tells me what they're looking for, I'll always ask him, is that an improvement on what you earn now? And sometimes people get like a bit off about it. And then I say, like, relax, like this isn't a bad thing. I want to make sure what you get next in a position suits what you're looking for. In the end of the day, us recruiters, the more you get paid, the more we get paid, because most recruiting is done on a percentile measurement of your first year's base salary, right? There is recruiters out there that will bump you. They will bump you $60,000 because they think they can, and if they place you, it's a jackpot for them. But it's a bad thing for you, and it's a bad thing for them. My advice is discuss money. You don't necessarily have to talk about what you're earning, but try to talk about what you're looking for. With certain companies and with certain individuals, if I have trust with them, if I've dealt with you before, like this is a very easy discussion. But if you're a new candidate, I always say like what are you looking for, and they'll say this much, and I always ask, is it an improvement? Because if you going from one company to another, it needs to be worth your while, right? Sometimes I have to ask the shitty question and say like what are you willing to accept? I'll always tell a candidate, right on the face of it. Like, look, this is a contracting position. It's a permanent position with a company, but they're contracting you out to a defense contract. Like, there's not a lot of margin in this for the company. So, like, you know, what's the low ball? I will always try push to get someone the number that works for them. I play devil's advocate in the end of an offer stage. I will always try let the company think they're getting a deal, and the candidate gets more than what they expected. I will always try push for that. So my advice is discuss money, Brian, but always make sure you have in black and white in an email that recruiter telling you exactly what number they send you over at. Sometimes with me, I'll send a candidate over with a number, but that has been discussed with the candidate, and there's an agreement between me and the candidate at what number I'm sending you over at. But sometimes I'm like, you know what? I think we should see where this goes, right? And then I say, you know, we didn't discuss, but I believe the candidate is within the bracket. The other side of the coin is, if you discuss to me what you're looking for, right, and I have the information, I'll tell you, look, the company is looking between this and this margin, right? So if you want to give me a number, I can tell you if it fits the criteria of the company. But you know, I play a bit of it's a to and fro. If I ask someone, like, in certain states in the US, it's against the law. You can't force people. Like in California, I can't ask someone what they're earning or what they're looking for. But how we propose that is, like, we are fully aware of the California state regulation on disclosing compensation or expectations. I asked the person, I said, would you like to discuss what you are looking for? If they say no, I go, not a problem. It is not a train smash. When it comes to the company side, I think that's where, like, James can probably comment on it. I think, yeah. James?
So from like the internal perspective, so we have budgets essentially for our hiring. We're like most companies are commercial. We have to make money, and that means we can't just spend whatever we want. Like, people are generally a company's biggest expense as well. So that's generally why we ask, is because we want to make sure that we can afford you, because we don't want to get through like an interview process and then realize that we are way off on salary, and it's kind of just wasting everyone's time if we do that. So we want to check kind of really early on kind of what someone's expectations are. Sometimes we'll ask like what you're on, if like the expectations seem a bit off, to kind of check that. And then if you get asked that, be prepared to justify if it's a big difference. Like, if you're going from, I don't know, like 30K to 50, like, be prepared to justify that. You've got to like prove that you're worth that much, because that's a big change. If it's like kind of 10%, then personally, I'm not too worried about that. I might try and push you down a bit if like you're right at the top end of the budget, and try and sell you a bit more on kind of the other benefits and the I guess longer term learning and development and things like that in the role. But that's generally why we kind of have those conversations. Like, yeah, internally it's around budgets, around can we afford you? We don't want to waste anyone's time. And then similar from when I worked in agency, from what Angus said as well.
I just also want to add, like, money is not everything at the end of the day. We've kind of already touched on a lot of these points. It's like, you got to look at it in terms of the package, and also really importantly is also benefits. Like as James suggested, like, sometimes you may get a base salary XYZ, and then you might get a company car allowance and medical and all this stuff. So it's often not just a specific amount as your base salary. So you got to look at it in terms of your benefits that you get with that, as well as what sort of opportunity that it's going to provide you. That may not always be clear cut. I mean, that's obviously going to probably be the hardest to quantify in terms of money, but sometimes you, and Angus, you already pointed to this, you're taking a role with a less amount and gone off, and it helped to progress your career to where you're actually earning more money. So money's always a tricky one.
Like, a good example of that in the US, right? You get companies like Rapid7, and you get companies like AWS. AWS will not pay an engineer more than $160,000 a year. right? How they make up the difference in you being a distinguished engineer or being a hotshot, offsec engineer, is they make up with that in stock, right? Stock options and other benefits. A company like Rapid7 doesn't necessarily pay the most in the industry, but it's like joining the army. You make a sacrifice. You sacrifice 2 years of your life working for a company like Rapid7, and it can open more doors. The one of the benefits of dealing with an agency, and I've seen this a lot recently, where I've dealt with some really amazing people that are just extremely humble, right? And then they say, I ask them, like, what are you looking for compensation wise? And then they go, they're looking for like $30,000, $40,000, and I'm like, right, I've seen your community engagement. You've spoken at DEF CON. You've got this experience. You've been with the same company consistently for at least 3 to 4 years. Like, I will then justify you bumping up. I'll always advise a candidate then, and I say, look, involve me in the negotiation. It doesn't mean I'm going to rip the arse out of it with my client, but I will justify with some of my clients that I have deep level trust. I will say, look, the candidate is earning this much, right? And I know they are being grossly underpaid. I believe this person is worth this much, right? And I think that's where the mark is. And 9 times out of 10, the client will support me in that. But it's only with my clients that I have like deep level trust with. I hope that sort of helps or adds value to it. Like, there is the value in the recruiter is, if you're really bad at negotiating, because some companies will, if you say you're looking for a low number and it's below their budget, they'll say, especially in the defense sector, they'll go, this person's happy with 40, let's give them 40, right? That's where it helps to have a sort of someone that is isolated from an objective perspective, i.e. a recruiter, to help you get the best deal possible without ripping the arse out of it.
Yeah, and I guess I actually have a question. What's the best way to, because I mean, obviously a lot of this works on market value and market rate. What's the best way to gauge that? I just saw Dan's comment. He's asked, the lowest he's asked for 25. There may be a right for his position or maybe too low. So understanding the market rate might help define like what sort of number you should be asking for.
Like, the US is a good example because it's so bloody massive, right? If I take, okay, like Sean, let's take your profile for example, right? If I take someone like you, say now you were living in New York City, right? And I'm pitching you for a job in San Francisco, right? New York is an expensive place. San Francisco is even more expensive, right? So chances are, if you've been with a company that you've been with now for 2 years and you were earning $150,000, I might pitch you at 160, right? But if you're coming from Missouri or like some small little city, right? And I'm pitching you for a job in San Francisco, right? I'm going to bump you massively because what you can get, I had a candidate recently that said that they had to go from, they were earning like 240,000 in Austin, Texas. And to move to San Francisco, they had to get a minimum of 500,000 liquid. So that means base and stock options, right? Because where they have a 4-bedroom house in Austin, in San Francisco, they can afford a 2-bedroom apartment because it's $8,000 a month for rent. So it depends on your geographical move. It depends how long you've been with the existing company, because chances are you've had a set increase every year unless you've promoted. There's no, according to me, there's no gold standard. There's no finite thing. It has to do in the end of the day with a lot of different variables. And if it feels right, it feels right. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But yeah, there's so many factors in it, right? I told people that I know for a fact were extremely underpaid. And then, we get them a good bump. The other thing is to remember, if you're coming from the military, right? A lot of people forget this. When you come from the military, you can't actually BS anyone about what you earned. Not necessarily if you come from the military, what you earned, you're going to get 10% more in Civvy Street. But I can literally go on Google and I can search what a lance corporal gets paid in the British Army, and I can get it within a close margin. Same in the US. I can search E5 3 years pay, and I can see what they earn. But yeah, when you're transitioning, you're gonna get a big bump. Usually, it's pretty. Sometimes people double the money they earn in the army. That's because the army gets paid terribly.
Cool. All right. So I've been warned by Mark. Let's wrap. So yeah, well, this has gone on for way longer than I was expected, which is a good thing. But yeah, a massive thanks to Mark, Angus, and James for joining, as well as everyone else who contributed. Hopefully, it's been useful. Yeah, so thanks for joining.
Cheers, guys.
And
Thanks
just
for having
Thank
me.
you. Thanks
What-
very much.
one quick thing, if anyone has any other questions on that, please just feel free to DM myself. I don't know if anyone else is open to that. But yeah, just feel free. Mark said yes, Angus.
Yeah, I'm wide open.
And yeah, just DM us and